Chapter 1032, Chasing Down Su Yan. Now the tables were completely turned. Su Yan fled, and Meng Hao chased her. 500 black beetles soared through the ruins of immortality like a black windstorm. All of them were at least a half a meter long or so, and a few of the largest were more than 3 meters long. 500 black beetles made a small-scale sea of insects. Although you couldn't say that they blotted out the sky, they did cause everything to shake, and sent endless ripples out as they chased after Su Yan. If it were just a matter of black beetles, Su Yan would have numerous ways of dealing with them and escaping. However, she wasn't just being chased by black beetles, she was being chased by Meng Hao. Meng Hao sat cross-legged on one of the larger beetles, eyes flickering coldly. His gaze only continued to get colder as he looked at Su Yan. After all, she was the one who had ruined his plan to harvest medicinal plants. Not only did she attempt to steal his business, but she ended up making it impossible for him to even harvest the medicinal plants at all. Then she used the pursuit of the black beetles as a tool to try to kill him. Most unforgivable was that she had planned to take advantage of his misfortune to extort his wealth. It had been a long time since Meng Hao had been victim of such plotting. Not even that old fox Fang Xiaodao aggravated him as much as this. Some people might prefer to treat women with extra tenderness, but Meng Hao completely ignored that. With a cold harumph, he extended his right hand and waved his finger toward Su Yan. It was none other than the 8th demon sealing hex. Even as Su Yan shot forward anxiously, she suddenly trembled. Her cultivation base completely stopped moving, and she screeched to a halt in midair. Next, Meng Hao's immortal meridians exploded with power, and his cultivation base surged. 123 blood demon heads appeared, roaring as they charged toward Su Yan. Su Yan's eyes widened, and she bit down hard on the tip of her tongue. Pain flooded through her along with cracking sounds as she broke free from Meng Hao's hexing magic. Then she turned, eyes flickering with fear, but more so, coldness. Instead of trying to evade the 123 blood demon heads, she breathed in deeply, absorbing the power of heaven and earth. Then she lifted her right foot up and stamped it down violently, striding in Meng Hao's direction. That first step caused the void to tremble. Her second step caused everything in the area to shake. The third step caused fissures to crack the ground for 3,000 meters in every direction. Meng Hao's eyes widened with shock at the sight of this pink-robed young woman's divine ability. She took only 3 steps, but those 3 steps caused her energy to surge. Meng Hao's mind was sent reeling. Each of the steps seemed to trample upon his inner thoughts, causing his cultivation base to be thrown into chaos, and the flame of his life forced to flicker. Next, it was with a completely icy face that Su Yan took a 4th step. Rumbling echoed out everywhere. When she took her 5th step, the entire world seemed to be turning inside out. Howling sounds could be heard in all directions. It was almost as if this area were turning into a different world altogether. Her 6th step caused the crashing sound of thunder to fill the area for thousands of meters in each direction, along with an archaic, ancient aura. Meng Hao's magical blood demon heads all trembled, and were smashed to pieces by the surging energy. It was in that moment that Su Yan took her 7th step. 7 Hellgut steps. 1. The ability used by Su Yan is very similar in both name and function to one of the main abilities used by Su Ming, the main character of Jin's Beseech the Devil. It doesn't seem impossible that Su Yan could be somehow descended from or connected to Su Ming, in much the same way that the Wang clan seems to be connected to Wang Lin from Renegade Immortal. Su Yan cried out the words as she took the 7th step. The void shattered, and massive roaring sounds could be heard. A huge foot appeared up above, emanating shocking energy. A boundless feeling of savagery buffeted Meng Hao as the foot stamped down toward him. The starry sky vibrated as Meng Hao looked up, eyes wide. Then, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture and pointed toward the huge foot. Paragon Bridge. He let out a muffled growl as his 123 immortal meridians, as well as his 33 heavens, formed into the Paragon Bridge, which shot toward the foot. A huge boom could be heard as the bridge and the foot collided. In that instant, the void around them seemed to be torn asunder. Boundless echoes rang out as the savage foot shattered, layer by layer, transforming into innumerable motes of light that then faded away. The Paragon Bridge also trembled and collapsed into pieces. Meng Hao trembled, and blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth. The pink-robed Su Yan's face was ashen, and blood also oozed out her mouth as she looked at Meng Hao in shock. She was in the ancient realm and not an ordinary ancient realm cultivator at that. She had her own Tao, Analogous to a true immortal relative to the immortal realm, she was a chosen of the ancient realm. Despite having only extinguished one soul lamp, she was by no means weak. In her view, Meng Hao was only in the immortal realm, and even if he was at the peak of the realm, he was still much weaker than her. Before, she had merely feared his black beetles and his mysterious, unfathomable spirit immortal stones. Therefore, she attacked him, hoping to at least injure him, and thus be able to escape the black beetles. However, in their first true interchange, she found that the two of them were relatively evenly matched. That filled Su Yan with fear, and she instantly fell back into retreat. Meng Hao remained seated on the black beetle, eyes shining with a strange light at the fleeing Su Yan. Inwardly, his heart was pounding with anticipation, not because of Su Yan herself, of course, but because of her divine ability. Throughout his years of practicing cultivation, Meng Hao had acquired all sorts of divine abilities and magical techniques. Not many of them left him moved, or left him with a feeling that the technique was especially powerful. However, during the times he had fought with Wang Mu and Wang Tengfei, they had used magical techniques of the Wang clan which had left him shaken. In fact, because of those battles, he had even got the idea of trying to acquire some of those magical techniques. Unfortunately, the Wang clan of the Ninth Mountain and Sea was one of the great clans, and to acquire their Taoist magics would be incredibly difficult. Just now, the divine ability used by this pink-robed young woman also left him quite shaken. What Taoist magic was that? It only took 7 steps to collapse my Paragon Bridge. Theoretically, it might have something to do with her cultivation base, or the fact that my understanding of the Paragon Bridge isn't complete, meaning I can't fully utilize it. However, that just goes to show that her Taoist magic of 7 steps has its own unique aspects. Meng Hao was lost in thought for a while as he chased Su Yan. Finally, he raised his right hand, performed an incantation gesture, and then pointed at her. That wave of a finger caused his 123 immortal meridians to materialize into a shocking flying rain dragon, which roared and beat its wings as it shot toward her in pursuit. Su Yan's face flickered as she saw the flying rain dragon bearing down on her. She gritted her teeth, performed an incantation gesture, and then placed her hands on top of her ears. Then she took a deep breath, using some unknown Taoist magic that caused the sounds of thunder to echo out. A huge wind kicked up, and Su Yan almost seemed to turn into a vortex that rapidly absorbed the power of heaven and earth. Next, she suddenly turned her head toward Meng Hao, opened her mouth and roared. That roar was loud enough to tear open the heavens and shred the earth. The sound of it superseded all other sounds in the world. It shredded the void, causing a massive wind to kick up. Meng Hao started to tremble, and his black beetles began to rock back and forth. Blood oozed out of his ears, and his mind vibrated so intensely that it felt as if his head was about to explode. That roar almost didn't seem to be coming from Su Yan, but rather a giant. It was filled with intense savagery and an unparalleled domineering air that seemed to defy the confines of destiny. Sound waves transformed into an attack that blasted toward Meng Hao. The result was that he was physically lifted up and pushed backward. Su Yan coughed up a mouthful of blood. Clearly utilizing this divine ability of roaring came at a great price. Her face was pale white as she sped forward anxiously. I just need to delay things a bit longer, she muttered to herself, pushing for more speed. If I can build up enough speed, I can break out of this place. Meng Hao finally stabilized himself, wiped away the blood that had oozed out of his ears, and looked at Su Yan as she fled. His eyes began to shine with an even more intense light. "You can't escape," he said. "No matter what you say, I'm going to catch you." His eyes flickered coldly, and his heart beat with excitement. As far as he was concerned, this pink-robed young woman was a treasure trove of divine abilities and Taoist magics. It would be a big pain to try to acquire one of the Wang clan's divine abilities, but he would be equally content to get his hands on some of this girl's magic. The wave of a hand caused all 500 of the black beetles to let out a collective roar. Their eyes were red with madness as they charged forth. Meng Hao's cultivation base exploded with power. However, Su Yan was moving so quickly that she was already some distance off. Meng Hao snorted coldly and extended his right hand, within which appeared the lightning cauldron. His eyes flickered with a demonic glint as electricity danced about, and he vanished. At the same time, Su Yan had almost built up enough speed to unleash another Taoist magic. Her body was beginning to grow blurry, and ripples were spreading out into the void. It was almost as if a tunnel were forming, a tunnel which she was just about to break into. In that moment, however, countless sparks of electricity suddenly appeared all over her body. This development occurred too suddenly, and she could sense something happening that caused her face to fall. Suddenly, she vanished, and Meng Hao appeared in her place. Of course, their speeds were different, so the moment Meng Hao appeared, the void tunnel promptly closed up. At the same time, Su Yan reappeared in the spot Meng Hao had just been occupying, right in the middle of 500 black beetles. The moment Su Yan appeared, the 500 black beetles immediately roared and shot toward her, radiating explosive ferocity. Su Yan was shocked to the core, and an expression of disbelief and shock instantly appeared on her face. That cauldron, how could it be here? Is your surname Wang? 1. I saw a lot of questions on the Chinese internet about this part where Su Yan mentions the cauldron and asks if his surname is Wang. Apparently Wang Lin from Renegade Immortal had a cauldron with similar properties to this one. However, based on the answers I read in a few threads, that cauldron was clearly destroyed, so it couldn't be the same one. However, this begs the question of why she would be saying something like this. There were various speculations about that too. Meng Hao's eyes flickered almost imperceptibly, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he sent his cultivation base rotating rapidly. The essence of divine flame appeared, combined with the power of 33 heavens, to shoot directly toward Su Yan. The 500 black beetles all attacked with full force. In response, the shocked Su Yan performed an incantation gesture and waved her hand, causing divine abilities to shoot out. However, the ghost eyes on the backs of these black beetles began to glow, and were easily able to repel her attack, and even began to grow more ferocious. As Meng Hao closed in, the essence of divine flame caused Su Yan's mind to spin. She was getting very anxious, but her face filled with determination as she raised her right hand. Instantly, light began to shine out from the creases in her palm, causing 3 palm prints to begin to appear in the air around her, surrounded by rumbling sounds. However, before the palm prints could finish forming, the surrounding black beetles took advantage of the moment to attack. Su Yan fell back, blood spraying from her mouth. It was at this point that, some distance behind Su Yan, 2 beams of light could be seen shooting through the ruins of immortality. Apparently sensing the ripples of magic, they headed towards Su Yan and Meng Hao. Before the approaching figures could even be seen, a voice could be heard from them. "My master is Meng Hao, do you hear me? Meng Hao, he's the ruler of the ruins of immortality, the lord of the 9 mountains and seas. I was just joking with you, all right. Why? You're being so petty. Why are you trying to kill us? You can't blame me. Everything I did was taught to me by my master. Why don't you go looking for him, all right? Aya, how dare you attack us? Damn it. Lord Fifth is really getting pissed off. You just wait and see. My master definitely won't let you off the hook." Expand. Of those 2 beams of light, one contained a colorful parrot with a meat jelly in the form of a bell attached to its ankle. The bell continuously let out tinkling sounds which echoed about. The other beam contained a young woman. A grim expression covered her face and blue veins popped out on her forehead. She actually looked a bit haggard, as if she were so aggravated she was about to go crazy. It was Li Linger. The parrot looked scraggly and somewhat gaunt as it flew through the air. Behind it was an enormous creature, tens of thousands of meters wide and terrifying to the extreme. It was like a giant sphere, covered with endless amounts of fur which drifted about. It had a single eye that stared out with boundless coldness. Occasionally, the fur which covered the creature would form into tentacles that would slash around, destroying anything they touched. Currently, this bizarre creature was chasing the parrot and Li Linger. Although the creature had a terrifying aura and was physically shocking to look at, it wasn't moving incredibly fast. It was almost as if it was in conflict with the natural laws that existed in the ruins of immortality, resulting in constant pressure weighing down on it. Therefore, as it moved along, it was surrounded by vaguely flickering light. "I was just messing around with you," the parrot cried angrily. "What are you being so vengeful for?" "Yeah, that's exactly right. He's being immoral. That's wrong. Just wait until Lord Third gets a bit more powerful. I'll definitely convert him." Shut up, shut you p," shouted Li Linger, who was on the verge of going crazy. Being around the parrot and meat jelly made her feel that her sanity was crumbling away. After being flung out into the ruins of immortality by Patriarch Reliance, she had spent her time exclusively with the parrot and meat jelly. They had cautiously made their way through the ruins of immortality, trying to figure a way out. At first, things had gone well. She could deal with the meat jelly's constant chatter and the parrot's extreme arrogance. After all, before giving a dog a beating, one still has to consider who its master is. Meng Hao had saved her, so, naturally, she had chosen to put up with his little pets. However, for some reason, the damn parrot seemed to have some completely perverted addictions. Li Linger had watched wide-eyed on several occasions in which the parrot, upon simply encountering creatures with fur or feathers, would suddenly act like a complete moron. Regardless of how powerful the creature it encountered was, the parrot would whoop with delight and speed excitedly toward it. What happened after that was an assault on Li Linger's eyes, and yet she couldn't help but gape. She almost felt like her head was going to explode, and everything she had always believed was toppled over. The most recent time it happened was when the parrot assaulted the gigantic sphere. Originally, that sphere hadn't even been moving. However, after several hundred rounds with the parrot, it got as mad as a hornet. The sphere-like creature couldn't take it anymore, and let out a roar that almost shattered Li Linger's cultivation base. They had fled immediately, but the sphere had apparently endured too much humiliation and chased them in a rage. As they fled, they had sensed the ripples of magical techniques and had surmised that they came from people. The parrot had then suggested they go in that direction, which they did immediately, preparing to plead for aid in this moment of disaster. Almost as soon as they got close, Meng Hao saw the parrot and Li Linger, as did Su Yan. However, Su Yan's attention was more drawn to the gigantic sphere following them. "Moon-eater," she breathed. Her face fell and her heart began to pound. The sudden appearance of the moon-eater cut off her path of escape. In front was Meng Hao and his black beetles, and behind her was the moon-eater. She was caught in a dragnet, and the result was that she lost almost all hope. Damn it, how could this be happening? There are only a few moon-eaters in all of the ruins of immortality. Normally they just sleep and wouldn't wake up even if heaven and earth collapsed. Even if they do awake, the natural laws are different, so they don't move around. What's going on? Why is this moon-eater chasing those people? How could that woman and that parrot possibly have provoked a moon-eater into such heights of rage that it would pursue them? Su Yan's scalp was numb. She was well aware of how terrifying an enraged moon-eater could be. She was just about to try to flee, when Meng Hao blazed toward her with his essence of divine flame. Su Yan immediately performed an incantation gesture, causing a divine ability to appear to fight back against Meng Hao. It only took a moment for the two of them to be locked in a raging battle. As they fought back and forth, Su Yan suffered multiple defeats. Blood sprayed out of her mouth, and she realized that, although she was well matched with Meng Hao, she was constantly distracted by the need to avoid the surrounding black beetles. This caused her to have several close calls. At the same time, the moon-eater was getting closer and closer. The coldness in its eyes seemed capable of destroying any living thing that it encountered. Damn it! Her face flickered as blood oozed out of her mouth. She knew that she couldn't hold on very much longer, perhaps 10 breaths of time at most, then she would be defeated. Gritting her teeth, her expression became one of incredible resolve. She allowed Meng Hao's essence of divine flame attack to slam into her, causing blood to spray from her mouth as she was seriously injured. However, she borrowed momentum from the attack to break out of the encircling black beetles, and then head directly toward the moon-eater. As she sped forward, she extended her right hand, causing all of her blood to surge. Moments later, a strange, sweet odor began to emanate off of her. No cultivator would be able to detect anything unusual about that fragrance, but it instantly caused the moon-eater to look over. All of a sudden, a huge opening appeared on its body that almost looked like a mouth. It looked completely savage as it opened up directly in the middle of the single eye, giving the creature 2 eyes. The mouth was filled with rows and rows of razor-sharp fangs, tens of thousands of them, glinting coldly. It almost seemed as if the creature's entire body was made up of fangs. The gigantic mouth breathed in, and Su Yan tumbled forward like a kite with its string cut, heading directly toward the moon-eater. In the blink of an eye, she had flown past the parrot, as well as Li Linger, who were still gaping in sight after having caught sight of Meng Hao moments ago. Now the two of them, as well as the meat jelly, watched as the moon-eater opened its mouth. When they saw the innumerable ghastly fangs inside, their shock turned into terror. Meng Hao frowned. Su Yan appeared to be on the verge of being swallowed up by the moon-eater, even if he used the lightning cauldron to switch places with her. Unfortunately, he would then be swallowed by the enormous creature. What a clever plan, he thought. He instantly realized what Su Yan was trying to do. She had obviously incited the creature into trying to swallow her up. Presumably, she had a way to get out of the creature's mouth even if it did swallow her. She was using this as a way to escape, and also to ensure that Meng Hao couldn't use his lightning cauldron. Well, you still won't be able to get away. Meng Hao was too entranced with Su Yan's Taoist magics. Despite the sudden turn of events, His eyes still flickered as he slapped his bag of holding to produce a nirvana fruit. This was not his nirvana fruit. It was the nirvana fruit of the first-generation patriarch of the Fang clan. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, Meng Hao shoved the fruit into his forehead. Rumbling filled his mind as it sank down into him. At the same time, he felt something swelling up inside of him. RUMMBLE. As Meng Hao looked up, he could clearly sense his immortal meridians exploding with power, growing stronger as his cultivation base climbed higher. 33 heavens collapsed, transforming into boundless immortal light that poured over Meng Hao, transforming into an imperial robe. As Meng Hao hovered there in the void, he no longer looked like the immortal realm paragon. He was a step beyond that. He was the immortal emperor of ancient times. Li Linger's eyes went wide. She had observed this same thing happening before, although on a screen. Meng Hao was now bursting with a powerful energy that made him capable of killing even ancient realm cultivators with 3 extinguished soul lamps. However, this was her first time sensing what it was like in person, and it sent her heart pounding. Her cultivation base trembled, and her immortal meridians felt compelled to acquiesce to Meng Hao. Su Yan was terrified. She could never have imagined that Meng Hao would have a trump card like this. Her scalp was tingling as she pushed with everything she had to fly toward the Moon Eater. She was well aware that reaching it was her only hope. An indescribable energy rose up from Meng Hao as he stared coldly over at Su Yan nearing the Moon Eater. Face expressionless, he took a step forward. That single step took him past Li Linger and the parrot. He then flicked his sleeve, causing a gentle power to push Li Linger and the parrot backward, far away from the Moon Eater. His second step caused him to vanish, and then reappear between Su Yan and the Moon Eater. Su Yan was now filled with hopelessness. She exploded out with all of the magical techniques and divine abilities she could muster. However, Meng Hao's hand snaked forward, shattering them all before, clamping onto her neck. His hand was icy, and as soon as it touched Su Yan, her cultivation base was locked down by Meng Hao's immortal power. "We don't have enough enmity built up between us for me to kill you," he said, "so be a good girl and I won't slaughter you." Simultaneously, one of the Moon Eater's tentacles shot toward them. Just when Meng Hao was about to dodge out of the way, the tentacle suddenly stopped moving. It was almost as if it had sensed something on Meng Hao, causing it to instantly shrink back. Meng Hao's eyes glittered, and he turned to look at the Moon Eater and its gaping maw, which was now only about 30 meters away. The Moon Eater was actually so terrified it was trembling, and it gradually began to back up. Slowly, its huge mouth closed. Within its solitary eye was a terror that caused Su Yan to be filled with astonishment. It was almost as if the thing was afraid of Meng Hao. Meng Hao's eyes shone brightly. Just now, when he had been on the verge of dodging to the side, he had felt something inside of him. The sealing mark placed on him by the white-robed woman when she had made him 13th in the echelon. The mark suddenly appeared on Meng Hao's forehead, flashing brightly. Meng Hao began to think about the white-robed woman's status as a paragon, and his heart trembled. Continuing to hold Su Yan with his left hand, he raised his right hand and made a dismissive gesture toward the Moon Eater. "Get out of here," he said experimentally, all the while preparing to back up if necessary. The gigantic Moon Eater was trembling visibly, and Li Linger, Su Yan, the parrot, and the meat jelly were all watching with eyes wide. The Moon Eater almost seemed to nod in response to Meng Hao before backing up and disappearing off into the distance. Li Linger gaped at Meng Hao, hovering there clad in his imperial robes of immortal light, energy surging. He was almost like a paragon of heaven and earth as he waved his hand, causing an enormous, terrifying creature to back down. That image was almost like a scene from a painting, becoming something firmly implanted in Li Linger's mind, and would never go away. The parrot blinked, and the meat jelly stared in shock. As for Su Yan, a complex expression suddenly appeared on her face regarding Meng Hao. "You're in the echelon." Chapter 1033, The Might of the Echelon. Chapter 1034, We're Not Suited. The Moon Eater slowly faded away into the sky of the ruins of immortality. Meng Hao hovered in midair, the energy of the immortal emperor slowly receding. Eventually, the nirvana fruit emerged from his forehead, which he then put into his bag of holding. He also placed numerous restrictive spells onto Su Yan, sealing her so that he could throw her into his bag of holding as well. Before she disappeared, a cold smile could be seen on her face. However, the shock and other complex emotions in her eyes could not be concealed. Meng Hao ignored that, however. Next, he turned to face the parrot and Li Linger. Li Linger subconsciously avoided his gaze. Her past impressions of Meng Hao still remained in her mind, and currently, her heart was filled with conflicting emotions, including confusion. She was very certain that, in the past, she had hated him to the bone. That was especially the case considering how he had humiliated her. When she had learned that it had been arranged for the two of them to be married, her initial reaction had been that she would rather die. She hadn't been able to even imagine how to handle being paired with Meng Hao as a beloved partner. To her, it would have been like a living nightmare. Therefore, she had chosen to flee the marriage. Of course, she had never expected that she would end up being rescued by the very person she was fleeing. Meng Hao could sense the conflict inside of Li Linger, and he looked away with a light sigh. He knew that she should have been back in the Li clan at a time like this. The fact that he found her being pursued by Yifazi clearly indicated that she had left her clan. It was easy to guess why. Considering the imminent marriage alliance, the fact that Li Linger had left her clan indicated that she had chosen to flee, just like he had. There was no other conclusion that he could come to. It was at this point that the parrot cleared its throat. "Hey Aoi, why are you butting into other people's affairs?" it said, sounding as wise and proud as he could. That was Lord Fifth's beloved concubine. Lord Fifth wasn't afraid of it. It was just my way of getting it to come out of its shell. "Well, now that you made it go away, AI, well, forget about it. Just never mind. I guess it just goes to show that there was no destiny between us." Currently, the 500 black beetles were swirling around in the air around Meng Hao, and the drone of their wings echoed out in all directions. Because of that, Meng Hao still gave off the feeling that he was someone that shouldn't be provoked, despite the fact that he no longer emanated the energy of the immortal emperor. Each and every one of the insects in the small army had a ghost eye on its back, which emanated a sinister coldness. The bugs themselves had cold, emotionless eyes, causing a harsh aura to slowly exude. Even an ancient realm expert would feel fear when looking upon these black beetles. Meng Hao glanced back at Li Linger and asked, "So, that old turtle left already?" Before Li Linger could answer, the bell-form meat jelly attached to the parrot's ankle suddenly roared. "That old bastard is completely immoral. Evil to the max. It deserves a horrible death. Lord Third solemnly swears an oath to convert it. That damnable old bastard of a turtle actually had the nerve to toss me aside and run off by himself. Lord Third was a fool to take pity on it earlier and give it so much advice. Grrr. Lord Third is so pissed off. That thing is shameless, misguided, a complete bully." As the meat jelly raged, it was clear that it was infuriated at Patriarch Reliance and even felt that it had been subjected to a great injustice. Hearing the meat jelly raging, the parrot then chimed in, "That's totally right. That bastard pushed things too far. Damn it." However, the parrot went a bit further, going on to make a declaration of a further aspiration. "Next time I see it, Lord Fifth is going to make sure it knows how awesome I am. I'm gonna turn it into one of my beloved concubines." Ignoring the two buffoons, Meng Hao's body flickered as he moved to a nearby black beetle and sat down cross-legged. After glancing around, he looked back at Li Linger and then cleared his throat. "Fellow Taoist Li," he said, "I think there have been some misunderstandings between us in the past." Li Linger looked up at him. The word misunderstanding caused her to think about many things, especially Meng Hao's multiple usages of his palm. When she thought about that, she still felt humiliated and angry. She could almost sense a lingering numbness and pain in her buttocks. "However, I did rescue you, right?" Meng Hao continued, "although you still owe me some money." Li Linger frowned. "That's because you forced me to write a promissory note," she said, word by word. Right. Well, the process isn't important. We're talking about karma, so you definitely owe me money." When he saw the look on Li Linger's face in response to this, Meng Hao quickly added, "But don't worry, you don't need to pay me back anymore." Based on Meng Hao's personality, it took quite a bit of effort for him to force those words out. "Look, neither of us have it easy in life, so why make things harder for each other? Our clans want an alliance, and they're willing to sacrifice us to get it. It seems obvious that the only reason we ran into each other here is because we're both trying to get away from that marriage. In that respect, I think we're both in the same boat." A bright glow appeared in Meng Hao's eyes as he continued, "Look, I rescued you. I also happen to know that I'm quite handsome and a lot of girls like me. For example, take that wench that I captured earlier. She made a move on me too, but I turned her down. Then she tried to do all sorts of evil things to me. Stuff like that can't be forgiven," Meng Hao said, without even a hint of shame coloring his face. It was a good thing Su Yan couldn't hear what he was saying. Otherwise, she would have been so angry that blood would have sprayed out of her mouth like a fountain. Although, he continued somberly, fellow Taoist Li, you must not under any circumstances continue to misinterpret my feelings. Trust me, nothing's going to happen between the two of us. I have absolutely no intention of pursuing you. Besides, I'm already married. The two of us just aren't suited for each other. In response to these words, the parrot stared, the meat jelly blinked, and Li Linger gaped in shock. She had never, ever seen someone praise themselves with such a straight face. You, she cried, eyes wide. Seriously, he said, taking a careful step backward. We're not suited for each other. Fellow Taoist Li, I know that the image of me surging with energy earlier definitely left you with a deep impression of me. However, you really need to control yourself. Don't let yourself fall for me. Women must learn to conduct themselves with dignity in life. The two of just aren't meant to be. Don't worry, Meng Hao, Li Linger growled through clenched teeth. If I had to choose between you and a pig, I would choose the pig. You really mean it, said Meng Hao, his eyes shining brightly. You, Meng Hao, Li Linger, always follow through on my word. Li Linger was feeling very vexed. Meng Hao was making it seem like she couldn't wait to marry him. That was even more the case when, in response to her words just now, Meng Hao appeared to be sighing with relief. That caused Li Linger's rage to flare even hotter. Meng Hao then let out a hearty laugh. Smiling, he waved a finger at a nearby black beetle. Fellow Taoist Li, now that our misunderstandings have been straightened out, I'd like to express my condolences. Come, come, have a seat on this bug. I'll escort you safely out of the ruins of immortality. When Li Linger heard this, her fury burned uncontrollably, and she looked at Meng Hao with gritted teeth and said, Condolences. Meng Hao, are you even able to talk without being crass? What the hell do you mean, condolences? Don't tell me you actually believe that I, Li Linger, thought of you as the love of my life or something. You think that you refusing me necessitates condolences. Meng Hao scratched his head and sighed, his expression one of helplessness. Very well then, I rescind my condolences. What do you mean you rescind your condolences? Li Linger felt like she was about to go crazy. No condolences, he replied quickly. Even though I refused your expression of love, even though I crushed all the good feelings you had toward me, even though from now on all you'll be able to do is gaze at me silently from a distance, despite all that, I really offer no condolences. All right? Happy. Li Linger threw her head back and howled. She gripped her hair in both hands and tugged it hard. It was almost like it was impossible to talk to Meng Hao without going absolutely crazy. Trembling, she thought about everything that had happened since she had left the clan, and the grief that welled up from her heart caused tears to flow out. She said nothing further. She simply sat down on the beetle's back, tears rolling down her cheeks. Meng Hao didn't say anything more either. The parrot and meat jelly looked at each other, then began to whisper back and forth. Occasionally, they would look over at Meng Hao and Li Linger, and the meat jelly's expression would be one of puzzlement. In contrast, the parrot was one of worldly-wise understanding as it apparently explained certain matters to the meat jelly. The meat jelly nodded its head several times empathetically. Everything quieted down. The black beetles buzzed along as Meng Hao escorted Li Linger off into the distance. Because of the beetles, their journey through the ruins of immortality went along with few hitches. Meng Hao would look around occasionally, and based on his past experiences in the ruins of immortality, was able to gradually lead them out from the depths of the ruins and toward their border. Several days later, the broken remnants of the ruins of immortality grew more and more sparse. Not far off in the distance, the border was visible, and beyond that, a sea. It was not a true sea, but rather, a body of dense mists that grew so thick that they eventually sank downward, forming into a sea of mist. Meng Hao was able to sense that at its very depths, the mist was so thick that there might actually be a true sea there. This place was none other than the Ninth Sea. Meng Hao's eyes glowed brightly as he stood up on the black beetle's back. The entire army of beetles didn't slow down a bit. They continued to speed along, getting closer and closer to the border. However, it was at this point that, all of a sudden, a person appeared out of thin air up ahead. It was a woman wearing a white robe, and when she stepped out of the void, it seemed as if the entire ruins of immortality went dark. It was like the whole world, including all the light of the stars, was gathered on her person. Even the Ninth Sea off in the distance went still. This woman seemed to be matchlessly supreme, as if in front of her, even natural law would cease to operate. She hovered there quietly, looking at Meng Hao. As soon as he laid eyes on the woman, Meng Hao's mind rumbled. He instantly sent a message to the black beetles to stop moving. However, he didn't actually need to do so. All of them were trembling and didn't dare to approach the woman. Meng Hao offers greetings, senior, he said, quivering, clasping his hands and bowing very deeply. This woman was the same one who had placed him in the echelon, the female paragon. In that instant, the parrot ducked its head like it was trying to hide, and it looked scared. The meat jelly was uncharacteristically silent and didn't even open its mouth. Li Linger could sense the terrifying aura emanating out from the white-robed woman, and immediately stood up and gave a curtsying bow. The woman's gaze passed from Meng Hao and Li Linger to come to rest on the meat jelly. I recently recalled a matter from the past. Do you still remember me? The meat jelly quivered. No, when it responded, its voice was archaic but light. When it spoke, Meng Hao couldn't help but think that something was wrong. He had never, ever heard the garrulous meat jelly only speak a single word. /expand. The white-robed woman remained silent for a moment, looking at the meat jelly with a complex expression, as if she were recalling the past. Meng Hao wasn't sure why, but for some reason it almost looked like an expression of bitter resentment. All of a sudden, Meng Hao's scalp began to go numb, and he subconsciously looked over at the meat jelly, then back at the white-robed paragon. He had hoped that he had been mistaken, and that there was not really a look of bitter resentment on her face. And yet, when he looked back at her, he was even more certain than before, causing him to blink. After a moment of silence, the white-robed paragon slowly asked, "Is it that you don't remember, or that you're not willing to admit it?" "Don't remember," the meat jelly replied, its voice hoarse, but lacking the slightest trace of its usual long-windedness. "Years ago there was a cultivator whose name was Lei Daozi1. Lei means lightning, Dao is the Dao, and Zai means child or son. As I mentioned before, Daozi is also what is translated as Dao child when used as a title. He was a lightning cultivator and one of the 9 emperors. He was known as the Lightning Emperor. Did you know him?" The white-robed woman's expression grew more and more complex as she looked at the meat jelly. Sometimes she remembered things clearly, other times things were a blur. However, recently, she had began to recall many things about the past. "Never heard of him." The meat jelly's voice was as ancient as ever, and yet now seemed to contain a hint of pain. The white-robed woman looked deeply at the meat jelly for a moment, then sighed and softly said, "If it weren't for the great catastrophe, he was the most likely to have become the 4th paragon. Back then he and I had an agreement." 1. The word used here, agreement, is a very broad term in Chinese that can mean a lot of things. However, the vague implication based on the context would be some sort of romantic agreement or perhaps engagement. One of the Chinese to English dictionaries I use even has engagement as a definition for this word. Of course, based on the context, you can't tell exactly what she means, and it could potentially be just some other random agreement. The meat jelly maintained its silence, saying not a single word. The white-robed woman closed her eyes for a while, and when she opened them again, they were looking at the parrot. Her expression was one of revulsion, and in response, the parrot lowered its head even further and glanced around furtively. From Meng Hao's perspective, the parrot looked very nervous, perhaps even scared. Finally, the woman turned from the parrot to look at Meng Hao. Her voice cool, she said, "Well, you're doing well. Once you enter the ancient realm, you will definitely become part of my plans." Finally, she turned to leave. Meng Hao was not a newcomer to the world of cultivation. He was used to schemes and counterschemes, and knew not to take everything people said at face value. Therefore, it was obvious to him that something was going on beneath the surface here. Clearly, she had only paid perfunctory attention to himself and the parrot. The true reason she had shown up was because of the meat jelly. It almost seemed like she had only shown up to ask it those few questions. He had long since known that the parrot and meat jelly had extraordinary backgrounds. However, he could never have imagined that they were wrapped up with the white-robed paragon. As for the meat jelly, apparently, its past involved some inspiring and tragic tale. Just when the white-robed woman was about to leave, she suddenly stopped in place, looked at Li Linger and said, "E." As she peered over, and her eyes filled with a strange gleam. "You look just like," she murmured softly. She waved a finger, causing Li Linger to involuntarily fly through the air to hover in front of the white-robed woman. "Are you willing to practice cultivation under me?" she asked, her tone serious. Li Linger stared in shock. Based on how Meng Hao had treated and talked to the woman, she could tell that there was something unfathomably mysterious about her. As she hesitated, she looked over and happened to see the shocked look on Meng Hao's face. With a cold, inward harumph, she ceased any hesitation and clasped hands toward the white-robed woman. "Junior is willing." The white-robed woman nodded slightly, then turned. As she did, a cloud appeared beneath Li Linger's feet, which carried her alongside the woman as she left. Li Linger looked a bit apprehensive, but when she turned and saw Meng Hao's astonished expression, she suddenly felt a great sense of contentment and glared into his eyes. Meng Hao truly was shocked and had the feeling that he had been neglected. The fact that the meat jelly had a mysterious background was one thing. However, he had practiced cultivation to the level of becoming the immortal realm paragon. When he absorbed the nirvana fruit, he could even reach the level of the immortal emperor. And yet, from what he could tell, Li Linger seemed to attract even more attention from the white-robed woman than he did. And then there was the peasant become king attitude she exuded as she stared at him hatefully. It was as if she was trying to convey that, when they met again in the future, their relative positions would be very different. Rolling his eyes inwardly, he clasped hands and bowed deeply to Li Linger, a solemn expression on his face, as if he couldn't hold back from expressing his condolences to her. Linger, I apologize. It doesn't matter if you have a new position, I still can't take you as a wife. I'm already married and you and I just don't suit each other. I wish you all the best and hope that you can someday find your own happiness. Meng Hao sighed, and his eyes shone with an expression of condolence. As soon as Li Linger heard his words, she trembled. Shut the hell up, Meng Hao. Glaring at him, she gritted her teeth and stamped her foot. With that, she ignored Meng Hao and followed the white-robed woman off into the distance. After they disappeared, sighs of relief could be heard coming from the mouths of both the parrot and the meat jelly. Now that was scary, Lord Fifth exclaimed. So the old demon granny has gotten some of her memories back. It patted its chest with its wing, as if it had just survived some harrowing experience. Thankfully, it seems that she only got some of her memories back, not a lot, the parrot murmured. Otherwise, she wouldn't have just looked annoyed when she saw me. She would have plucked me and roasted me for dinner. It seemed truly surprised to still be alive. The meat jelly let out a long sigh, after which its face lit up with excitement and it said, How was my acting? Ha ha ha, Meng Hao and you old pigeon, tell the truth. Was Lord Third's acting good or not, huh? Good or not? Ha ha ha, hey, I almost forgot that we had a bet. Lord Third wins. Lord Third's acting ability is incredible. However, it seems a bit wrong and immoral. Pigeon Fifth, don't you agree? Now that the meat jelly was speaking, it blabbered on, apparently having held its tongue for far too long earlier and was now looking to make up for it. Your acting is worth a fart, said the parrot, smacking the meat jelly. You almost gave it all away. You said way too much. Next time, remember that when you talk to the demon granny, you should only say one word. Meng Hao stared at the meat jelly in shock. The meat jelly had now reverted to behaving like it always had in the past, and from their dialogue just now, it seemed that it and the parrot had been betting with each other about something. Meng Hao felt a headache coming on, and wasn't sure what to say to the two ninnies. However, he couldn't forget the lightning emperor that the white-robed woman had mentioned. He looked thoughtfully over at the meat jelly but didn't ask any further questions. On many occasions in the past, he had tried to pry out information about their past, but to no avail. He had gotten used to that. Finally, he sent out his divine will, causing the black beetles to speed forward. Several hours later, Meng Hao, along with the 500 or so black beetles, and the incessantly bickering parrot and meat jelly, all emerged from the ruins of immortality. They hovered in the starry sky, and out in front of them was the ninth sea. Thinking about everything that had happened recently, Meng Hao turned back to look through the ruins of immortality in the direction of planet East Victory. His eyes then gleamed with determination as he turned and headed toward the ninth sea atop his black beetle. The Nine Seas God world will most likely finally give me all the rewards I earned during the three great Taoist societies, trial by fire. A thoughtful expression appeared in his eyes as he mused about it. The three great Taoist societies had all agreed to accept him as a disciple because of his being in the echelon, and had also expressed the intention of giving him some good fortune. He also knew that he wouldn't be spending a lot of time in the Nine Seas God world. After picking up his prizes, he would practice cultivation for a bit, and then head to the other two great Taoist societies. The good fortune they will provide me is most likely something to help me get to the ancient realm as quickly as possible. His eyes glittered. According to what the white-robed paragon had said, it wouldn't be until he stepped into the ancient realm as a member of the echelon that he would figure into her plans. As for the ancient realm, he had his own path to tread. Absorb the nirvana fruits, he thought with a frown. After leaving planet East Victory, he had tried to absorb the nirvana fruits on multiple occasions. However, he couldn't permanently fuse with any of them, not even his own nirvana fruits. Actually, not even Fang Wei had been able to stay fused with his nirvana fruits for very long. That was something he had been able to sense during their battle. Meng Hao maintained his silence as he got closer to the Ninth Sea. Occasionally he would pass traveling cultivators, but when they saw him and his 500 black beetles, they would fearfully avoid him, not daring to get close. He didn't want anyone to recognize who he was, so he used the black feather to change his appearance. Therefore, nobody who saw him had any idea that he was actually the preeminently famous Meng Hao of the Ninth Mountain and Sea. As he neared the Ninth Sea, he gradually heard crashing sounds like that of ocean waves. Up ahead, the sea of mist roiled unceasingly, and an indescribably boundless energy shook everything in the starry sky. Meng Hao didn't waste any time. Occasionally, he would attempt to absorb the nirvana fruits, and he occasionally brought Su Yan out of his bag of holding. He would try to have casual and friendly conversations with her in the hope of convincing her to give him some of her Taoist magics in exchange for her freedom. However, Su Yan would only look at him derisively and make piercing, uncompromising comments. After several attempts, it was clear that no matter what line of reasoning he attempted, Su Yan would never agree. Finally, he had no more patience. Waving his hand, he covered her with restrictive spells, sealing her completely, whereupon he stuffed her into a bag of holding. I bet that if she goes through a bit of suffering, she won't be so uncooperative. Unless absolutely necessary, Meng Hao didn't want to use soul search. That was a very vile method, and there was no sort of unresolvable enmity between the two of them as of yet. The best outcome, and his first choice, would be for her to cooperate and hand over some of her Taoist magics. Several days later, Meng Hao, atop a black beetle, finally entered the border region of the Ninth Sea. That black beetle was the only one he kept outside of his bag of holding as he looked out at the mists of the Ninth Sea, a strange gleam in his eyes. The Ninth Sea seemed boundless, almost completely without end. Mist stretched out as far as the eye could see. Everything seemed damp, leading Meng Hao to the conclusion that there really was a huge sea at the bottom of all the mist. Such a huge sea, he breathed. Back in the Fang clan, he had seen a map of the 9 mountains and seas, and was aware that if he passed all the way through the Ninth Sea, he would end up in the region of the 8th mountain. The 9th mountain and sea is not the end of the road for me. As he looked off into the distance, his heart filled with lofty aspirations. On his path of cultivation, he wanted to be free and unfettered. He wanted true freedom and independence. Heaven could not block his path, and earth could not obstruct his way. He patted his black beetle, which let out a roar as it transformed into a black beam of light that shot into the mists of the Ninth Sea. Almost in the exact moment that he entered the Ninth Sea, countless eyes suddenly snapped open, both in the mists that surrounded him and the blackness of the depths of the sea. Those eyes belonged to numerous sea beasts and sea demons that inhabited the Ninth Sea. Normally speaking, they did not have conflicts with cultivators, but as of this moment, for some reason they all opened their eyes and roared, and their expressions were that of murderous intent. It was as if there was something about Meng Hao's aura that roused all of the sea beasts and sea demons of the Ninth Sea into a rage. Chapter 1035. The Meat Jelly was the Lightning Emperor. Chapter 1036. Nine Seas God World. Almost in the same moment that the sea beasts and sea demons opened their eyes, some of the sea beasts closest to Meng Hao began to charge toward him through the mists of the Ninth Sea at top speed. As they sped along, they caused the mists to seethe and faint rumbling sounds to echo out. Meng Hao sat on his black beetle, bursting with lofty aspirations. Suddenly his eyes narrowed, and he looked up ahead into the mists. Without any warning, a roar exploded out, and the mist surged away from him as a huge seal burst onto the scene. The seal was fully 9 meters long with razor-sharp teeth. It almost looked like a dog one. In Chinese, the word for seal is literally sea dog, except that it had no fur, only scales. It sped out of the mists toward Meng Hao, bursting with energy comparable to the immortal realm. In the blink of an eye, it was upon him. Its eyes were filled with incredible killing intent, as if it simply couldn't live under the same sky as Meng Hao. Meng Hao gaped, flabbergasted. This was his first time ever visiting the Ninth Sea, and as far as he could remember, he had never offended anyone from here, unless you counted Fan Donger. The sudden appearance of this seal was completely unexpected, causing him to frown. A fishy aroma blasted into his face as he glared back coldly at the seal. When it was less than a meter away, seemingly on the verge of latching its jaws onto him, his right hand snaked out and clamped onto the seal's throat. The seal let out a whimper as it screeched to a halt. It struggled violently, But no matter how it howled, Meng Hao's vice-like grip did not budge in the least. By now, his fleshly body strength was at the very peak of the immortal realm, meaning that only a handful of people were qualified to force him to use magical techniques. Most enemies in the immortal realm would be easily crushed by the power of his fleshly body alone. Meng Hao's eyes flickered with coldness as he squeezed down with his hand. Cracking sounds rang out, and the seal spasmed a few times before its meters-long body went limp, its neck having been crushed by Meng Hao and its soul completely exterminated. As it died, it glared at him with a look of vicious madness. He frowned and loosened his hand, allowing the seal's corpse to drop down into the sea below. It was at this moment that, all of a sudden, more roars could be heard as more sea creatures began to charge toward him from all directions. In the blink of an eye, he was completely surrounded by dozens of sea beasts. There were all sorts of creatures, each one completely vicious-looking. As soon as they appeared, they shot through the air toward Meng Hao, staring at him with madness and hatred. There were even the ripples of magical techniques emanating out from them, causing heaven and earth to rumble and the ninth sea to seethe. Meng Hao's frown deepened. Something definitely felt off. With a cold harumph, he lifted his right hand, causing his 500 black beetles to emerge. They instantly spread out toward the sea beasts, causing buzzing sounds to fill the air. In the blink of an eye, roaring filled the air as the sea beasts and the black beetles began to fight. However, no matter what the sea beasts did, their divine abilities were useless against the black beetles. When they bit viciously at the black beetles with their sharp teeth, not even a scratch was left behind. In contrast, the beetles chomped at them voraciously. In the space of only about 10 breaths of time, the entire area was stained red with blood, and nothing remained of the sea beasts except for corpses. What was left behind of their bodies was quickly devoured by the black beetles. It was a bloody scene, but when it came to scenes of carnage, Meng Hao had seen much worse. Something like this wouldn't cause him to feel ill at ease. However, the frown never left his face. He proceeded along, sending the black beetles ahead of him. In the short span of a few hours, numerous sea beasts from the ninth sea attacked him with reckless abandon, almost as if they were insane. First it was a few at a time, then a few dozen at once, then hundreds attacked him simultaneously. There was even a sea dragon that rose up with them from the sea floor, roaring, filled with madness and hatred as it tried to consume Meng Hao. This isn't because of Fandonger, he thought, killing intent flickering. The black beetles slashed at the sea beasts in a frenzy, causing miserable shrieks to ring out. As for the sea dragon, which was over 30 meters long, Meng Hao simply stepped forward and punched its head. It instantly began to fall apart into pieces, after which its body shattered. Soon, Meng Hao's mind was trembling. He was now surrounded by seething fog, and as he sent out his divine sense to scan the area, he could tell that almost 1,000 sea beasts were charging toward him. Some of those sea beasts were pitch black and humanoid. Based on their aura, it was obvious that they were not ordinary sea beasts, but rather something exceptionally vicious. When they looked at Meng Hao, it was with towering hatred. If that were all there were to it, it might not matter. But gradually, Meng Hao began to sense that it wasn't just the sea beasts who hated him. It was almost as if, for some inexplicable reason, the ninth sea itself was trying to expel him. Off in the distance, Meng Hao saw even more sea beasts charging toward him from all directions. Nobody truly knew how many of them existed in the boundless ninth sea. However, he could tell that if things didn't end soon, he would become embroiled in a huge battle and would continue to attract the attention of even more terrifying sea beasts, which caused his scalp to go numb. If a creature appeared that was similar to the latter stages of the ancient realm, he might very well die. Damn it, what's going on here? He thought, sending the black beetle flying upward, away from the surface of the sea itself. Behind him, more than 1,000 sea beasts flew out in pursuit, roaring. It was at this point that he retrieved a command medallion from within his bag of holding. Raising it high above his head, he cried out at the top of his lungs, "Disciple Meng Hao has returned to the Nine Seas God world and requests an escort from the sect." As his voice echoed out, he crushed the jade medallion. Ripples immediately spread out, carrying his voice echoing out into the depths of the sea. By now, the swarm of attacking sea beasts was very close to him. Meng Hao was no pushover. Naturally, he couldn't simply ignore so many sea beasts. Snorting coldly, he caused his immortal meridians to explode with power, then lifted his left hand, summoning tens of thousands of mountains and sending them crushing down toward the sea beasts. However, it was at this point that a cold voice suddenly echoed out from the bottom of the sea. "You're Meng Hao." Even as the voice rang out, Rumbling could be heard, and the surface of the sea parted as a figure appeared. He stepped out to hover on the mist above the sea. It was a man, but he had a very strange appearance. His skin was pitch black, and although it was not covered by scales, he did have a golden fish scale on his forehead. He was clothed in the garb of a disciple of the Nine Seas god world, just as Fan Donger had been the first time Meng Hao had seen her. As soon as he appeared, he glanced around at all the sea beasts, resulting in them instantly stopping in place. Then they backed off and then vanished into the waters. Meng Hao scanned the area with divine sense and could tell that, although they had calmed down, they hadn't actually left. Furthermore, their eyes were filled with just as much hatred as before. "Many thanks for getting me out of trouble, fellow Taoist," Meng Hao said, sighing with relief. He clasped hands and bowed toward the man. "Sir, I am Meng Hao, ordered by the three great Taoist societies to come to report for duty at the Nine Seas god world." From the look of it, this man was not a cultivator, but rather some being that was somewhere between a sea beast and a human. It had cultivated some unique magical technique that allowed it to take human form. It seemed like a demon, and yet was different from demons. The man stared grimly at Meng Hao, hatred flickering in his eyes, as well as revulsion, all of which he seemed to be fighting to control. "Come with me," he said coldly. An instinctual killing intent seemed to rise up within him that he intentionally suppressed as he turned and flickered toward the bottom of the sea. Meng Hao's face darkened. He didn't care much about sea beasts, but as for this being that was neither a human nor a demon, he didn't understand why it hated him and wanted to kill him. After all, he had never done anything to offend the Ninth Sea. Remaining completely on guard, he watched as the man headed down into the sea, then collected his black beetles and followed along with a cold harumph. The two of them proceeded along in single file, not talking, moving at top speed. Meng Hao could sense even more types of sea beasts as they neared the sea floor, and all of them seemed to view him as an enemy. "Why exactly are they acting like this?" he thought. Gradually, they went deeper and deeper, until Meng Hao's face finally flickered with shock. The pressure weighing down on him as he went deeper only continued to grow more intense. However, his cultivation base automatically rotated to push back against it. The pressure was not because of some sort of sealing magic, but rather pressure that simply pushed down from the Ninth Sea itself. Because of that, his cultivation base was restricted, much the same as if he had been carrying something very heavy. At the same time, magical techniques that would be easy to unleash on the surface would be much harder to use here. The deeper they went, the greater the pressure. Meng Hao was shaken as he realized that his cultivation base had already been reduced to about 70% of its normal level. Finally, his eyes started to glow with excitement as he suddenly realized why the Nine Seas god world was so terrifying. If you spent long periods of time practicing cultivation there, then, when you went out into the outside world, your cultivation base would explode up and be even more powerful than before. The three great Taoist societies really are incredible. There have to be special reasons why they have survived for so many years. Even just the special benefits provided from practicing cultivation here are enough to make the cultivators of the Nine Seas god world much stronger than those of most other sects. At this point, he stopped fighting back against the Ninth Sea and instead focused all of his efforts on enduring it. After enough time passed for an incense stick to burn, the man led them to a place that Meng Hao found completely shocking. Here at the bottom of the sea was a land mass. It was not the seafloor, but rather floated in the middle of the waters. It stretched far out into the blackness, making it impossible to see where it ended. It looked enormous, like the fabled undersea palace of the Dragon King. Ornamental rocks could be seen everywhere, placed next to sprawling buildings. Bizarre and exotic flowers could be seen, as well as mountain ranges and even rivers and cities. There were innumerable cultivators, flying around in beams of light. Sea dragons could be seen swimming about, causing the entire world to overflow with the sensation of life. 9 golden gates marked the entrance to the sect, and erected above the top of the foremost gate was a sign with 4 words. Nine Seas God World. Chapter 1037, Hostility. This was the Nine Seas God World, one of the 3 great Taoist societies of the Ninth Mountain and Sea. It had existed for tens of thousands of years, stretching back into ancient times, seemingly eternal. Apparently, it had existed for as long as the 9 mountains and seas themselves. People who practiced cultivation here for a significant amount of time, and then left for the outside world, would experience an explosive rise in their cultivation base. In all of the Ninth Mountain and Sea, the only sect which was so amazing that they could practice cultivation in the ninth sea itself, and even lower their sect to the bottom of the sea, was the nine seas god world. Because of cultivation practices like that, it was no exaggeration to say that it was a god world. That was even more so when you considered the power of heaven and earth which existed there. In all of the ninth sea, this location had the most terrifying concentration of it. In addition, the deeper you went in, the more boundless that energy became. Meng Hao's mind trembled. He had been to many sects, but none of them had left him as shaken as he was now that he was looking at the nine seas god world. He looked at the land mass spreading out in front of him like a continent, and he saw, not just cultivators, but other bizarre beings. They had humanoid bodies, but they were clearly another type of life form. Each one had a life force that was reminiscent of a sea beast. Meng Hao's eyes flickered as he realized that these were unique demonic cultivators of the ninth sea. They were not true greater demons, but had transmogrified during the course of their cultivation, gradually assuming their current appearances. Even more shocking to Meng Hao was that the nine seas god world actually floated some distance away from the bottom of the sea itself, separated by a mass of pitch-black darkness. The further down one went from there, the greater the pressure was, and the more energy of heaven and earth could be found. It could be said that to cultivators, the pressure exerted by the ninth sea made this place like a holy land for cultivation. Nine seas god world, he murmured, eyes shining with a strange light as he sensed the vast majesty of the place. He could feel the pressure from the ninth sea, and the fact that his cultivation base was limited to 70% of its normal power. His eyes slid across the 9 glittering gates that marked the entrance to the nine seas god world. Above the main gate were the words nine seas god world, and as for the other golden gates, they were actually more like stone steels than actual gates. Furthermore, the surfaces of those golden gate stone steels were packed with names, each one of which glittered with golden light that was visible to all cultivators in the nine seas god world. The names formed a list, and on each of the stone steels, the list included 10,000 names. On one of the stone steels, Meng Hao saw Fan Donger's name, and it was listed in the 94th position. Next to the golden characters that made up her name, a string of text could clearly be seen. It said, 24,000 meters down, 54 hours. There were many other names that had the number 24,000 meters next to them, with a variety of different times. Other name lists could be seen on the other stone steels, as if these were records of various trials by fire. Meng Hao's heart began to pound. The Golden Gate stone steels reminded him very much of the Medicine Pavilion and the Pill Pavilion back in the Fang clan, as well as the stone steel he had seen in the ancestral land. The names all belonged to disciples of the Nine Seas God world, and their presence here indicated great honor and glory for those disciples. A strange light began to gleam in Meng Hao's eyes as he followed the cold-eyed man, who completely ignored him as he led the way into the sect. Occasionally, they would encounter disciples of the Nine Seas God world. When they saw the man leading the way, they would smile and nod, and then their gazes would turn to Meng Hao. Some of those people were demonic cultivators, and when they saw Meng Hao, they would gape in shock. But then, just as quickly, their eyes would be shot with blood, and murderous auras would surge up from them. Meng Hao frowned as he followed the cold-faced man into the Nine Seas God world. Almost as soon as they set foot onto the landmass, it seemed like all of the demonic cultivators in the entire Nine Seas God world, regardless of what they were doing at the moment, simultaneously looked up and stared at Meng Hao. Very quickly, killing intent rose up in their eyes, as well as towering rage and disgust. There were tens of thousands of these demonic cultivators, and the feeling of having them all stare at him was something impossible to describe. Meng Hao's face flickered, and his eyes went wide. That was especially so when he realized that some of the demonic cultivators had ancient realm cultivation bases. When their cold gazes of hatred fell upon him, his heart began to pound. If that were all there were to it, it might not be a big deal. But suddenly, streams of divine sense shot out from many of the residences that were visible, filling Meng Hao's heart with terror. From the look of things, the tens of thousands of demonic cultivators were just barely able to keep themselves under control. In sharp contrast, the human cultivators of the Nine Seas God world were looking curiously at Meng Hao. Immediately, people began to recognize him. That's Meng Hao. I heard that he was accepted as a disciple by all of the 3 great Taoist societies. In the Battle of Planet East Victory, virtually the entire Ninth Mountain and Sea saw him rise to prominence. He's the immortal realm paragon. The cultivators all wore different expressions. Some were surprised, some wore cold looks, and others looked derisive. However, regardless of the various cultivators' expressions, when they sensed the strange behavior of the demonic cultivators, they were all shocked. The strange feeling of disquiet in Meng Hao's heart continued to grow even more intense. He was more on guard than ever as the cold-faced man led him through the air across the Nine Seas God world. As they wound their way deeper in, the killing intent and ferocity of the demonic cultivators only continued to grow stronger. It was around this time that, all of a sudden, a cold snort echoed from among a group of demonic cultivators, followed by a bright beam of light that shot toward Meng Hao. It was a middle-aged man, extremely handsome, with a fish scale on his forehead. He wore a white robe and had two red horns growing out from his forehead. He radiated a powerful, murderous aura and moved with incredible speed. As he closed in on Meng Hao, he extended his right hand, causing ripples to spread out that formed into 9 flying swords. In the blink of an eye, the 9 flying swords took on the appearance of 9 crimson loaches. They roared, expressions vicious as they shot through the air. As for the middle-aged man, he had a murderous aura and an explosive cultivation base. The power of immortal meridians emanated out, not quite 100. Nevertheless, they had at least 90. Upon seeing him attack, the faces of all the other demonic cultivator disciples of the Nine Seas God world flickered with even more killing intent. As for the demonic cultivator who had escorted him thus far, the man hesitated for a moment, but didn't berate the other demonic cultivator or attempt to block his way. He acted almost as if he didn't see, proceeding along as if he didn't care whether Meng Hao was able to catch up or even got killed. Meng Hao frowned and backed up by several paces. He waved his hand, causing a chain of mountains to appear and block the 9 loach swords. "Fellow Taoist, what's the meaning of this?" he asked as he backed up. He really didn't want his initial entrance into the Nine Seas God world to be marked by conflict with the cultivators here. His opponent didn't say a single word in response. He smiled coldly, as if he believed that speaking to Meng Hao would sully his own mouth. He performed an incantation gesture, and the air behind him rippled as a huge red hand appeared. Shocking ripples spread out as the hand shot toward Meng Hao. The man's cultivation base exploded with power. Despite being suppressed somewhat due to being in the Ninth Sea, it was still incredibly shocking. His killing intent was also incredibly intense. "Fellow Taoist," said Meng Hao, falling back further, his frown deepening. "Please inform me as to exactly what has happened. If you want to try to kill me, you must at least give a reason." However, the middle-aged man didn't slow down at all. He advanced, waving his hand, causing the scale on his forehead to glitter. Instantly, he was surrounded by over 1,000 fish scales, all of which glittered with cold light as they screamed toward Meng Hao in the form of a windstorm. "Scale slaughtering," the man said coldly, his killing intent continuing to rise up. Apparently, he wanted to slice Meng Hao into tens of thousands of pieces. Meng Hao was so enraged that a smile broke out on his face. After arriving at the Ninth Sea, he had instantly been treated as an enemy, for inexplicable reasons. Then he got to the Nine Seas God world, and the demonic cultivators there treated him even worse. To put it rather bluntly, Meng Hao was the type of person to defy laws and principles, even of the heavens. His was the Tao of freedom, something that could not accept outside fetters or grievances. Although he was retreating from his opponent, that opponent was not holding back, and was instead more intent on killing him. "Give them an inch and they take a mile," thought Meng Hao, his face darkening. He stopped moving backward and instead took a step forward. He allowed the fish scales to close in on him and to slam into his body. Clanging sounds could be heard, and numerous disciples of the Nine Seas God world stared in shock as the fish scales did absolutely nothing whatsoever to Meng Hao. In fact, many of them shattered under the backlash of striking him. Meng Hao's eyes glowed coldly as he took 3 steps forward. A massive windstorm sprang up, and as the 9 loach swords closed in on him, he lifted his right hand and struck out with a palm. The 9 swords immediately began to tremble. "Scram," he said calmly. That one word transformed into 9 claps of thunder that sent the 9 loach swords spinning away, after which they exploded. An unmatchable energy exploded up from Meng Hao, causing his opponent's face to fall. Blood oozed out of the man's mouth as he was forced backward by the energy attack. However, he clenched his jaw and once again performed an incantation gesture. At the same time, Meng Hao snorted coldly, waving his right hand to summon a blood demon head. Although his cultivation base was somewhat suppressed, he was still incredibly powerful within the immortal realm. He waved his hand, causing the blood demon head to roar, a roar which caused the blood of many surrounding cultivators to shiver beyond their control, as if it wanted to rush out of their bodies. The ferocious blood demon head shot forward toward the middle-aged man, who instantly fell backward, his facial expression flickering as an intense sensation of deadly crisis rose up in him. He had the powerful feeling that if he was even the slightest bit too slow, he would be dead. Unfortunately, his speed obviously didn't match up to that of the blood demon head, which was instantly on top of him. The man's expression was despondent, and his eyes glittered with hatred as he screamed, "Why haven't all of you attacked yet?" Immediately, a dozen or so of the surrounding demonic cultivators stepped forward, cultivation bases surging as they attacked the blood demon head. There were even more who let out bellows of rage and shot toward Meng Hao. Fully 100 demonic cultivators all attacked simultaneously. Killing intent was like a flood that exploded out, causing that area of the Nine Seas God world to seem like it had descended into a chaotic riot. All of the non-demonic cultivator disciples of the Nine Seas God world looked on with flickering faces, and some began stepping forward to stop the fighting. However, Meng Hao unexpectedly smiled, a smile filled with killing intent. He opted to stop trying to figure out why all this was happening. After all, his opponent had tried to kill him, and therefore, things were now simple. That man would die. This was Meng Hao's chance to establish his place in the Nine Seas God world. His eyes flickered coldly as he suddenly raised his hand, within which appeared the lightning cauldron. Electricity danced, and a huge boom could be heard as he suddenly switched places with another of the demonic cultivators next to his middle-aged opponent. The man's face fell in shock and alarm as Meng Hao reached out and tapped his finger toward his forehead. That single finger surged with a murderous aura, and it was obvious that if he touched the middle-aged man, he would be instantly killed in body and soul, dead beyond the shadow of a doubt. At that point, an enraged voice shouted out from off in the distance. "How presumptuous!" Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever, almost as if he hadn't heard the voice. His finger continued to descend until it landed on the man's forehead. A boom rang out, and the man trembled violently. His meridians were shattered and his body exploded into a cloud of gore. Meng Hao waved his hand, dispersing the blood, then turned to face the newcomer. "Do you mean that I'm being presumptuous or that he was?" he asked coldly. Chapter 1038, I Promise Not to Kill You. In the time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint, surrounded by a crowd of demonic cultivators, he killed his opponent with precision and determination. The surrounding cultivators of the Nine Seas God world looked on with shock, and the demonic cultivators' eyes narrowed. Everyone was astonished by Meng Hao's lightning-like attack. For countless years, it was extremely rare for a Nine Seas God world disciple to have been attacked and killed within the Nine Seas God world itself. Even during the insurrection caused when the Jai clan sleeper cells revealed themselves among the forces of the three great Taoist societies, all they did was sow chaos. As for Meng Hao, although he was technically a disciple of the Nine Seas God world, the other cultivators hadn't approved of him yet, and essentially viewed him as an outsider. His methods were vicious, and he attacked to kill. Then he simply waved away the resulting cloud of blood, leaving the cultivators of the Nine Seas God world completely stunned. When Meng Hao turned and spoke, his words echoed out into the ears of everyone present. All disciples, both demonic cultivators and regular disciples, could clearly hear them and could sense the domineering arrogance within them. They sounded like words intended to defy laws and principles, even those of the heavens. As of that moment, everyone was left with a deep impression of Meng Hao. At the same time, a bellow of rage echoed out from off in the distance. Meng Hao's eyes were cold as he watched a black-robed old man approaching. He strode through the air, bristling with rage, cultivation base surging. Shockingly, an enormous illusory image could be seen behind him. The image was that of a sea dragon, pitch black with 4 sets of razor-sharp talons. Its whiskers were long and floated around its head, making it look especially vicious as it glared at Meng Hao with cold eyes. A wild wind kicked up, disturbing the energy of heaven and earth in the area. As for the old man, at first glance he looked like a cultivator, except that on his forehead there was a black fish scale. Furthermore, 2 black, coiled horns grew out of the top of his head, which radiated a flickering glow that made him seem terrifyingly powerful. "You ruthless rascal, "How dare you act presumptuously in the Nine Seas God world," he said, his voice ancient and thunderous. The sound of his voice turned into massive pressure which crushed down toward Meng Hao. Even more shocking, soul lamps began to swirl around him, 5 of which were extinguished. "That's Elder Hai Sheng." "Greetings, Elder Hai Sheng." The old man's appearance on the scene immediately energized the demonic cultivators, all of whom offered greetings. The old man ignored them and focused completely on Meng Hao. As he approached, killing intent swirled around him, a will of hatred that seemed to ooze out from his bones, as if he couldn't bear to live under the same sky as Meng Hao. As he closed in on Meng Hao, he didn't hesitate for even a moment. Ignoring the surrounding demonic cultivators, he stretched his right hand out and made a clawing motion. The sea dragon behind him roared, then shot past him, flying gracefully toward Meng Hao and then slashing at him with its claws. It was a vicious attack filled with killing intent, clearly designed to rip him to pieces. The claws even seemed to embody natural law, as if they could borrow from the power of the Ninth Sea itself. It transformed into a sealing mark which caused everything in the area to shake. The seafloor quaked, and boundless ripples spread out. Meng Hao's eyes glittered coldly as a sense of crisis filled him. Shockingly, he transformed into a golden rock, which let out a piercing cry as it shot toward the sea dragon. Moments later, the rock and the dragon collided, and a huge boom echoed out. That one interchange caused Meng Hao in golden rock form to spit out a mouthful of blood, increasing his speed rapidly to evade the first slash of the sea dragon's claws. As he retreated, the sea dragon swept its mighty tail toward Meng Hao, ripping the air violently as it neared him. If that tail strike landed on Meng Hao, it wouldn't matter that he had a true immortal fleshly body. If he wasn't killed, then at the least, he would be seriously injured. After all, this was the attack of an ancient realm cultivator with 5 extinguished soul lamps. All of this takes some time to describe, but occurred in only a brief moment. The tail, filled with bursting power, was just about to slam into Meng Hao. Meng Hao, face grim, transformed back from a golden rock into human form, then waved his right hand. Instantly, buzzing filled the air as 500 black beetles appeared in front of him, using their backs to form a huge shield. BOOMMM. The tail smacked into the black beetle shield, which trembled violently and then collapsed into 500 parts. However, despite being dispersed by the blow, the force of the blow had been split amongst the black beetles such that not a single one was killed. With the help of the black beetles, Meng Hao retreated roughly 3,000 meters. Waving his right hand, he caused the 500 black beetles to swirl around him as the illusory sea dragon prepared a second slashing attack. The speed of the attack caused the surrounding disciples of the Nine Seas God world to gasp. They could never have imagined that Meng Hao, who had an immortal realm cultivation base, could fight back against the attack of an ancient realm elder. The black-robed old man frowned, and his killing intent grew more intense as he advanced again. Meng Hao took a deep breath as he glared at the old man. His ancient realm cultivation base was not ordinary. However, they were still at the bottom of the sea. If they were outside, he would be even more powerful. Meng Hao had his speculations that if he successfully absorbed his own nirvana fruits, the explosive power of his immortal realm cultivation base might be strong enough to fight back. However, that would only be if the Ninth Sea wasn't suppressing his cultivation base. His eyes glittered, and as the pressure from the old man crushed down on him, he snorted coldly. However, he did not retreat. Instead, he took a step forward, then spoke out, his voice booming, presumptuous. "I, Meng Hao, am a conclave disciple of the Nine Seas God world. After returning to my own sect, I was inexplicably attacked. You, an elder, didn't even stop to inquire about who was in the wrong, but instead attacked with deadly force. And you say that I'm presumptuous. The person I killed was the presumptuous one. I'm a member of the Fang clan, a disciple of all of the 3 great Taoist societies. He wanted to kill me. I bet he was actually an agent of the Jai clan. I heard that not too long ago, the Jai clan had sleeper cells in the 3 great Taoist societies that sowed a lot of chaos. That man must have been a cultivator of the Jai clan. He attacked me impulsively, and then even called on a bunch of accessories to aid in his treason. Killing me would earn him a lot of credit in the Jai clan. Killing me would destroy the reputation of the Taoist societies. Killing me would accomplish his mission." Meng Hao's words were as sharp as daggers. With each sentence he spoke, he took a step forward, taking every opportunity to embellish his words, trumping up the gravity of the situation. When the surrounding demonic cultivators heard his words ring out, they were instantly enraged. and began to shout out angrily. "You! You're shameless slanderer. He wasn't a Jai clan agent, and we definitely aren't accessories to treason." Their killing intent grew even stronger, as if they wanted to chomp Meng Hao up and swallow him. Some of the more irascible ones clenched their fists and began to walk forward. As for the ordinary cultivators, they looked hesitant. Quite a few had already pressed down on Jade slips to notify elders within the sect. The disturbance was also attracting the attention of disciples from other areas in the sect, who were now flying over to watch the events play out. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever, but inwardly he was laughing coldly. When it came to battles of oratorical wit, he had never been defeated. Not in the Violet Fate sect, not on planet South Heaven as large, and not in the Fang clan. It would be impossible to say how many people would grudgingly describe him as sharp-tongued. "If you're not from the Jai clan, then why would attack me as soon as you saw me?" he retorted, glancing around coldly at all the infuriated demonic cultivators. Then he turned to the black-robed old man and coolly said, "And now, you even have an elder joining you. It's a classic case of the big bullying the small. Elder Hai Sheng, could it be that you want to start your own version of the torture chamber right here? You want to use the greater power of your ancient realm cultivation base to kill me?" "That's because you," the demonic cultivator's eyes went bright red. But before they could finish responding, Elder Hai Sheng gave a cold harumph, and his expression became incredibly dark. Meng Hao was speaking very loudly, causing his voice to boom out in all directions and attract a lot of attention. Elder Hai Sheng wanted to attack him, but didn't dare to be so obvious. Therefore he could only secretly wallow in his fury that Meng Hao had blocked his previous 2 attacks. When he spoke, his voice was like thunder, pushing down oppressively on everyone in the area. "It doesn't matter what happened. Killing people here cannot be tolerated. Men, arrest him and take him to the sect court to be held accountable." Elder Hai Sheng could see that the crowd was only growing larger, making it impossible for him to attack Meng Hao again. He knew that, as of now, it would be impossible to kill him. Inwardly, however, he was sneering coldly. He looked at Meng Hao, flicked his sleeve, and thought, "I might not be able to kill you this day, but I will most certainly humiliate you. Your reputation among the disciples of the 3 great Taoist societies will be ruined. Furthermore, this will ensure that all other powers in the 9 Seas God world know that our demonic cultivator horde and you are irreconcilable enemies." With the demonic cultivators taking the initiative, more and more people will be unable to suppress their ill feelings, causing more trouble for you. That way, you will only find yourself facing more and more enemies in the 9 Seas God world. Even if the grand elders and patriarchs approve of you, they are not your Tao protectors. Eventually, sooner or later, it will reach a point where you'll definitely die here. That is the only way to give vent to the blood enmity that exists between us. That is the only way that we 9 Seas God world demonic cultivators can ease the stench of your vile aura. And if you want to know the reason why, well, too bad, I'm not going to tell you. Elder Hai Sheng's face was as cold as ice, and his eyes were shot with blood, causing Meng Hao's heart to sink. Meng Hao was still trying to figure out why all of this was happening, but he couldn't be certain. What exactly was it that had caused such deep-seated enmity between him and the demonic cultivators? Is it the spirit immortal stones, or perhaps me being part of the League of Demon Sealers, or maybe me showing up here threatens the interest of some unknown party, an old foe of the Fang clan? Meng Hao felt a headache coming on. Even after pondering the matter from every angle, he was still perplexed about the situation. After Elder Hai Sheng finished speaking, 7 or 8 disciples flew through the air toward Meng Hao, killing intense seething. Meng Hao's eyes glittered coldly. He had already started killing people, so he didn't mind killing a few more. Although, if he could get some more promissory notes, that would be even better. Since they're not going to provide any explanation, he thought, I'll just force them to owe me more money than they'll ever be able to pay back. Furthermore, I can't believe that this disturbance has gone unnoticed by those old fogies of the 9 Seas God world. They have to know what's happening. He was irritated, and seeing how much the demonic cultivators wanted to kill him, he found the whole situation to be very annoying. "Don't you worry. As long as you do what I say, I won't beat you to death," he said coolly. Lifting his left hand, he caused tens of thousands of mountains to crush down from above. Chapter 1039, I Have Proof. Of the 8 demonic cultivators, 3 were female. They were extremely beautiful and charming, as it seemed most female demonic cultivators were. Despite the murderous looks that currently warped their faces, they were extremely attractive. Although they all had various body parts that clearly belonged to sea beasts, that wasn't distracting, and if anything, enhanced their beauty. The rest of the male demonic cultivators were all equally handsome. Currently, all 8 of these demonic cultivators were now closing in on Meng Hao. His eyes glittered as he waved his right hand, causing rumbling sounds to echo out as the mountain-consuming incantation materialized into the form of a mountain chain, which crushed down onto the incoming cultivators. The 8 demonic cultivators were prepared, however. Echoing booms rang out as they performed incantation gestures, causing immortal chi to surge out. Each and every one was in the immortal realm. Although none were true immortals, they were all false immortals. They fought back against the mountain chain with divine abilities and magical techniques, as well as with their dharma idols. Booms rang out in all directions. All of these demonic cultivators were at the peak of the immortal realm. It was with cold harumphs that they fought back against the mountain-consuming incantation, causing the mountain chain to collapse. Furthermore, they arranged themselves in a magical formation, allowing them to swap locations and increase the power of their divine abilities. In the blink of an eye, the mountain-consuming incantation's mountain range collapsed into pieces. The 8 demonic cultivators continued to charge forward, led by a beautiful woman who had no scales at all, and looked almost exactly like a normal cultivator. The only difference was that she stood inside of a gigantic shell that was far larger than her own person. She moved with incredible speed, nearing Meng Hao, eyes flickering with killing intent. She lifted her hand to reveal, shockingly, a beautiful pearl which was emanating glittering light. "Solidify," she said. Although her voice was beautiful, it instantly caused the surroundings to grow colder. The glittering light of the pearl emanated strange power, as it threatened to lock down Meng Hao. His eyes shone with a bizarre light as he lifted his right hand in response, then pointed up into the air. A writ of karma. Instantly, black and white light appeared on his hand, which transformed into threads that shot out. Simultaneously, karma threads appeared over his head. Almost as soon as the karma threads appeared, Meng Hao took a step forward. Instantly, he was directly in front of the shelled female demonic cultivator. Her expression flickered as Meng Hao's hand reached out to tap her forehead. The woman's face fell as an intense sensation of crisis rose up in her heart, and her shell rapidly snapped shut to protect her. However, Meng Hao snorted coldly, which shook her mentally and sent her cultivation base into chaos. The shell stopped in place, and Meng Hao's finger shot into the shell like lightning to land directly onto the female demonic cultivator's forehead. It was a light touch, but it was enough to bind her karma threads. He lifted his hand up and tied the karma threads that no outsider could see into a knot, linking them together. The knot then turned into a brilliant light in the middle of his palm, which was then transformed by the magical technique into a promissory note. The female demonic cultivator's body trembled, and she felt as if something inside of her had been taken away without her volition. Shocked, she tried to retreat, but it took only the blink of an eye for Meng Hao to wave his hand, causing a wild wind to sweep over her. Her body was beyond her own control as she was grabbed by Meng Hao, sealed, and stuffed into his bag of holding. It worked, he thought, falling back and taking a moment to examine the demonic cultivator he had just captured. His eyes rapidly began to glow even brighter. "Demonic cultivators are great. I can sell them off as pets or even mounts, anything people will buy. Their entire bodies are treasures. I could carve out random chunks if I wanted and refine them into chi and blood medicinal pills. That giant shell also has a demon heart. Excellent, excellent. This is much better than all that seafood from the Milky Way Sea." Meng Hao appeared to be delighted. As far as he was concerned, if the demonic cultivators viewed him as an enemy, then he might as well treat them as seafood. All of a sudden, he felt intense regret. Damn it, I shouldn't have killed that one earlier. Even in his moment of pain, his body flickered to appear in front of one of the other demonic cultivators. This time, it was a man whose back stuck out so far it almost looked like a camel. Actually, it was no hump, but a turtle's shell. Shockingly, this demonic cultivator had started practicing cultivation as a turtle. "I hate damn turtles most of all," Meng Hao murmured. The demonic cultivator's face fell, and Meng Hao extended his right hand. A writ of karma appeared again, along with intense rumbling sounds as he forced ties of destiny. The demonic cultivator trembled and tried to flee, but Meng Hao instantly caused a huge hand to appear and snatch toward him. The star-plucking magic rotated as he grabbed the man, sealed him, and stashed him away. He moved with incredible speed, following the same pattern. In a very short period of time, he had captured 4 demonic cultivators. This scene caused the surrounding disciples to stare with wide eyes. "What is he doing?" "Oh, I remember. This Meng Hao has a strange hobby of getting people to write promissory notes. He even created a divine ability that can force people to be tied to him via karma. He just captured junior brother Jin and junior sister Shui. As for the demonic cultivators, when they saw what was happening, they were enraged. Roars of fury could be heard as dozens of them charged toward Meng Hao. Apparently, Meng Hao's action spurred all of the demonic cultivators into a rage. After the first dozen charged him, they were followed by hundreds more, all of whom flew into the air straight toward him. Elder Hai Shen's eyes were bright red, as if new hatreds were being piled onto old ones. Gritting his teeth, he was just about to attack when, all of a sudden, he stopped in place and remained silent. Even if he didn't attack, there were hundreds of demonic cultivators attacking. Even though they were all false immortals, there were hundreds of them attacking at the same time, an attack that even an ancient realm cultivator would be forced to avoid. Energy surged, shocking magical techniques were unleashed, and killing intent filled the area. Meng Hao might be powerful, but the sight of it caused even his scalp to tingle. He grabbed a fifth demonic cultivator and then began to back up. The man struggled and howled, but Meng Hao quickly sealed him and continued to retreat. Boom! The place he had just been standing in shattered. Ripples spread out, and hundreds of demonic cultivators continued chasing Meng Hao with frenzied attacks. Damn those old farts from the Nine Seas God world, Meng Hao thought. Why haven't they shown up yet? He backed up under the onslaught of hundreds of maddened demonic cultivators, sure that the old bastards were currently watching the spectacle from the sidelines. I killed someone before and they still didn't make an appearance, he thought as he backed up. Finally, he snorted coldly. Well, I was in the right. If something really bad happens, the old fogies will have to take responsibility. In that case, I'm going to force them to show their faces. Eyes flickering, he raised his right hand, within which appeared the lightning cauldron. He might fear the combined attacks of all of the demonic cultivators, but in truth, Meng Hao wasn't the least bit frightened of fighting outnumbered. In fact, as long as he was careful, such large-scale fighting was the best type of battlefield for him. Electricity danced, and a rumbling sound could be heard as he vanished. When he reappeared, he was right in the middle of all the demonic cultivators, having switched places with one of their number. In the moment that he fully appeared, and before anyone could react, he reached his hand out and shoved out forcefully. A demonic cultivator whose body was half covered with scales had its karma tied up and was captured. Next, the flash of lightning could once again be seen, and Meng Hao disappeared. He showed up in another location, causing the demonic cultivators to roar in frustration. Meng Hao was like a loach, virtually impossible to pin down. No matter how much force the demonic cultivators used in their attacks, they were never able to keep Meng Hao in one place. Of course, in all the chaos, Meng Hao received some injuries. Blood oozed out of his mouth, and yet his eyes shone as brightly as ever. Often, it would only take one flash of light before he had captured yet another demonic cultivator. 1520. Not much time passed before Meng Hao had captured over 30 demonic cultivators. Finally, there was someone who couldn't endure the situation any longer. A cold snort echoed out from the very depths of the Nine Seas God world. It was accompanied by heaven-shaking, earth-rocking pressure, a pressure which changed natural law and caused the entire Ninth Sea to seethe and roar. When that sound echoed out, Meng Hao's face fell. Shocking pressure rumbled down as a giant finger materialized in midair, which then pushed down toward Meng Hao. Essence aura also reeled out. Tao realm, Meng Hao's eyes went wide. He had absolutely no way to fight back against the terrifying might of the Tao realm. However, almost as soon as the finger appeared, a dry cough echoed out. At long last, the old-timers from the Nine Seas God world couldn't sit still any longer. The dry cough echoed out to cover everything, transforming into a mighty pressure that prevented all of the demonic cultivators from attacking. An old man appeared out of thin air. A single step forward, and he was in front of the giant finger that was pushing down toward Meng Hao. He waved his hand out to touch the finger. Rumbling echoed out in all directions as the hand and the finger made contact. The finger trembled and then faded away. As for the old man, he staggered backward a few paces, his face a mass of white and red lines, as if his chi and blood were in chaos. "Elder brother Wu, there's no reason to act thus," said the old man. Meng Hao immediately recognized him. It was none other than Ling Yunzi. He wasn't the only one to appear. He was followed by 7 or 8 disciples of the Nine Seas God world, including Fan Donger. She looked coldly at Meng Hao, inwardly rejoicing at his misfortune. As soon as Ling Yunzi showed up, all of the disciples of the Nine Seas God world clasped hands and bowed. Even the black-robed elder Hai Sheng bowed his head. At this point, a cold and ancient voice echoed out in all directions, replying to Ling Yunzi. He killed a member of my demonic cultivator horde. Meng Hao didn't attack first, answered Ling Yunzi slowly. In fact, he evaded twice. Any member of the sect who attacks a conclave disciple has committed a grave offense that cannot be absolved even if they are killed in the counterattack. Even if he had not died, he would have been immediately expelled from the sect. I didn't see any of my demonic cultivators attack of their own initiative, replied the cold, ancient voice. I just saw this kid killing my people. Furthermore, he captured 33 disciples of my demonic cultivator horde. Shouldn't he immediately set them free? This time, Meng Hao didn't wait for Ling Yunzi to respond. He wasn't worried about causing a huge ruckus. After all, he was the crown prince of the Fang clan, and was a disciple of all of the three great Taoist societies. If the Nine Seas God world allowed anything unfortunate to happen, it would cause a massive conflict within the Ninth Mountain and Sea. Therefore, full of confidence and courage, he flickered to appear next to Ling Yunzi, then cried, "Those 33 seafood dishes owed me money, huge amounts of spirit stones. They can't pay me back, so they sold themselves to me to pay off the debt. I have proof." Even as he spoke, he lifted up his hand, within which were a stack of promissory note formed by a writ of karma. 1. The references to seafood in this and later chapters are pretty funny. The second character of the word seafood is a complete homophone for the word immortal. Therefore, when spoken, the word would sound like sea immortal. However, it would equally sound like seafood, which is a really common word. I will go back and forth between seafood and seafood dish when translating this term because seafood is an uncountable noun and seafood dish is a countable noun. Countable and uncountable nouns do not exist in Chinese, making it difficult to stick with one or the other in certain situations. By the way, the original Chinese characters are consistently Chinese letter, seafood, not Chinese letter, sea immortal. Note from Urgen, I feel like eating seafood. Note from Deathblade, I don't particularly feel like eating seafood, although there's a pretty high-end buffet near my house that has unlimited king crab legs. Okay, I changed my mind, I feel like eating seafood. Chapter 1040, Don't Provoke Me. Ling Yunzi gaped in response to Meng Hao's words. The other disciples of the Nine Seas God world behind him also stared with wide eyes. Fan Donger gasped. The other cultivators in the area felt their jaws drop and their minds reel. All of that was because Meng Hao had said the words, seafood. Simultaneously, the surrounding demonic cultivators' eyes went bright red, and their desire to kill rocketed up, transforming into a tempest within the Nine Seas God world. He actually dared to call us seafood. He must be killed. Kill him now. I haven't eaten a cultivator for a long time and I want to eat him. Roaring sounds raged up into the air, echoing out in all directions. Meng Hao laughed coldly, and his expression was the same as ever. His words had been uttered intentionally, of course. He did not believe for a moment that if he spoke politely, the demonic cultivators would suddenly stop viewing him as an enemy that needed to be killed. For whatever reason, they hated him and wanted him dead, a situation that didn't seem possible to resolve. Therefore, since he didn't have the power to fight back physically, he would use fatally destructive words as his weapon. Sometimes, the power of one's words were of more use than the strength of one's cultivation base. For example, calling the demonic cultivators seafood dishes was something that no other person would dare to do. In fact, because of the history and roots of the Nine Seas God world, it was most likely a term that no one had even thought to associate with the demonic cultivators. However, Meng Hao said it, and the words echoed out for everyone to hear. On many occasions, a single sentence, or even just two words, can completely change the situation. A perfect example was this very moment, in which the non-demonic cultivators of the Nine Seas God world were looking around with strange expressions on their faces. Normally speaking, they viewed the demonic cultivators as fellow sect disciples, but right now, when they looked at them, they couldn't help but think about seafood. Lies upon more lies, raged the ancient voice. Massive killing intent bore down, materializing into a huge hand that rumbled down toward Meng Hao. From the look of it, that hand was capable of completely crushing the entire land. As it descended, the air shattered and natural law collapsed. It was as if the fury of the heavens were crushing down, causing Ling Yunzi's face to flicker. At this point, a soft sigh echoed out as an old woman appeared in midair. She waved her finger toward the huge hand, causing the hand to collapse, whereupon it transformed into a huge tentacle. A muffled grunt echoed out, but the tentacle didn't fade away. Instead, it swerved around the old woman and continued on toward Meng Hao. The old woman did nothing to intervene this time. She merely said, "Enough, junior brother Wu. You know how important Meng Hao is. Don't force me to damage our friendship." As she spoke, a stream of divine sense shot out from thin air. Although no physical body was present, the aura of the Tao realm appeared, radiating intense pressure. The threatening nature of the aura was plainly evident. This aura merged with those of the old woman and Ling Yunzi, creating a towering energy that swept out in all directions, causing all the surrounding regions of the Ninth Sea to seethe. Almost as soon as the stream of divine sense appeared, a second stream of divine sense also exploded out from within the depths of the Nine Seas God world. This divine sense radiated a sense of madness and ferocity, and was filled with demonic qi. This was clearly a Tao realm demonic cultivator. However, even with that divine sense merging with that of the cultivator named Wu, they were no match for the old woman's faction. Things weren't over yet, though. Almost as soon as the Tao realm aura appeared, two more Tao realm auras appeared from two different directions. The streams of surging energy actually formed into four factional powers. The tentacle paused in midair, as if they all were now in the middle of a standoff. The surrounding disciples of the Nine Seas God world looked on with flickering faces. Neither demonic nor non-demonic cultivators could ever have imagined that they would be witnessing a shocking scene like this. There were only a few disciples who watched with glittering eyes. Clearly, they were already aware of the complex nature of the relationships between the various factions within the Nine Seas God world. Meng Hao's eyes widened. This brief probing on his part had already revealed the depth and caliber of the Nine Seas God world. I can't believe they have 7 Tao realm experts. They definitely deserve to be one of the 3 great Taoist societies. Meng Hao's mind trembled. He could now see that the faction represented by the old woman was the strongest within the Nine Seas God world. That was also the same faction which had insisted on accepting him as a disciple. After a long moment, the archaic voice echoed out from within the tentacle, cold and filled with killing intent. "We can forget about the person he killed. If he just hands over my disciples that were captured and kowtows to admit his wrongdoing, then we can put the matter to rest." The old woman frowned. As far as she was concerned, handing over the captured demonic cultivators would be fine. However, the matter of kowtowing to admit fault was a bit excessive. She was just about to open her mouth to respond when Meng Hao began to laugh. "Put the matter to rest. After arriving in the Ninth Sea, I was hunted murderously by numerous seafood dishes. Then I arrived at the Nine Seas God world, and even more seafood inexplicably attacked me. There was even one seafood dish which tried to kill me. After I killed him, an old seafood dish shamelessly used his ancient realm cultivation base to try to murder me. After that, a whole army of mini seafood dishes joined forces to attack me. Then in the end, in an unbelievable turn of events, a Tao realm expert actually tried to make a move on me. Even I have limits to my patience. You think you can just put the matter to rest? Like hell we can put it to rest." Meng Hao's wording was sharp and incisive, his voice cold. As soon as the words left his mouth, the surrounding disciples frowned. Many of them believed Meng Hao to be ignorant of the height of the heavens and the depth of the earth. His voice didn't match up at all to that of an almighty member of the Tao realm. As for the demonic cultivators, they began to chuckle coldly, believing Meng Hao to have vastly overestimated himself. "Screw off, you don't qualify to speak in this situation," said the ancient voice, which echoed about like thunder. Even though Meng Hao stood next to Ling Yunzi, blood began oozing out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth due to the vibrations of the voice. However, his expression was one of ferocity as he threw his head back and laughed. "I'm not qualified. I'm the crown prince of the Fang clan, and in the future I'll certainly be the clan chief. The Fang clan has Fang Xiaodou, the Earth Patriarch, along with Patriarch Yangsu and the first-generation Patriarch. In the Battle of Planet East Victory, they cut down Tao Realm experts as easily as slaughtering chickens. You want me to kowtow to you? That's like having the whole Fang clan kowtow to you. Even if I did kowtow, would you dare to accept it?" His words echoed out like thunder into all ears. Even the owner of that ancient voice, who had not appeared in person but remained hidden in secluded meditation, was speechless. He could afford to disregard Meng Hao, but he couldn't afford to disregard the Fang clan. That was especially true after the first-generation patriarch of the Fang clan put on such a display of might in the Battle of Planet East Victory, and had even cowed the Jai clan into retreat. How could he even compare? This Dao realm expert had personally witnessed the first-generation patriarch on the attack, and it left his scalp numb and mind spinning. Suddenly, the legends about the Fang clan's first-generation patriarch all seemed to rise up into his mind. He was from a generation of fierce experts, a contemporary of Jai Tian. According to the legends, in the Great War in which Lord Jai became the heavens, the first-generation patriarch of the Fang clan was the #1 killer, bathing the entire Ninth Mountain and sea in blood. However, Meng Hao wasn't finished yet. By the way, I'm not just a disciple of the Nine Seas God world. I'm also a conclave disciple of the immortal ancient Taoist rite and the sublime flow sword grotto. Did you ask the immortal ancient Taoist rite and the sublime flow sword grotto whether or not you could mess with me? You want me, their conclave disciple, to kowtow. That's the same as having the entire immortal ancient Taoist rite and the entire sublime flow sword grotto kowtow to you. Well then, let me ask you the same thing as before. If I did kowtow, would you dare to accept it? As Meng Hao's words echoed out, Ling Yunzi stood there silently. As for the old woman, she smiled slightly. She had been planning to interfere in the matter, but now it seemed there was no need to do anything. Her eyes glowed with amusement as she watched Meng Hao. As for the old Dao realm expert who represented the demonic cultivator horde, he continued to hesitate. Do you think your crappy seafood horde is the only power structure among all the 3 great Taoist societies? You think I don't qualify? Well then let me ask you, who does qualify? If you don't give me an explanation right now, do you really think that the Fang clan, the immortal ancient Taoist rite, the sublime flow sword grotto, and these elder patriarchs of the god world couldn't completely wipe out your seafood horde? Meng Hao's voice grew clearer and clearer, his wording sharper and more incisive. All of the surrounding disciples were gasping, and the faces of the demonic cultivators fell. As of this moment, Meng Hao was now the center of attention of all of the Nine Seas God world. He stood there, jaw tilted up, his domineering will raging for all to see. You know what? I don't even need to call on all those people to help. If you say the word kowtow one more time, how much are you willing to bet that I won't crush this Jade slip and summon the first-generation patriarch of the Fang clan himself to slaughter you where you stand? With that, Meng Hao held a Jade slip aloft for everyone to see. His words immediately caused an uproar. Not only did the faces of Ling Yunzi and the old woman flicker, so did the faces of the 2 Dao realm patriarchs from the demonic cultivator horde. The other 2 almighty Dao realm experts from the other power factions were equally shaken. As of this moment, Meng Hao's words were absolutely the most powerful weapon he could possibly wield. I know you're probably wondering if I'm bluffing. Well, let me explain it to your sorry ass. My first-generation patriarch personally gave me this Jade slip, and then promised to appear at my side at any time, because I'm the successor of the one-thought stellar transformation. I'm also the only one in the Fang clan to ever successfully concoct the first-generation patriarch's 3 holy pills. Plus, I did something that almost no one else has ever done. I corroborated the Tao on my own, and I opened the maximum possible 123 meridians. And in fact, I'm also in the echelon. Meng Hao listed out one fact after another. The result was dead silence that lasted only for a moment before complete tumult took over. For all the years that the Nine Seas God world had existed, Meng Hao was the first person to ever excoriate a Dao realm expert. Furthermore, his venomous words were like a sharp sword. Anyone who heard them would feel their mind rumbling. Meng Hao had decided he might as well go all out with his words, in much the same manner as he had killed the demonic cultivator earlier. He wanted to firmly establish his position among the various factions in the Nine Seas God world, with their complex relationships. He didn't just want to unnerve the ordinary disciples, he wanted to awe the almighty Dao realm experts. His words contained nothing truly secret. The Dao realm experts could easily do some investigating and confirm the truth of what he was saying. One of the reasons he wanted to establish his position in this way was that he did not intend to stay in the Nine Seas God world for very long. Therefore, the more domineering he could make himself, the easier and smoother things would be. Instead of starting out by being bullied, he would unsheath his sword, making himself a giant mass of bristling spikes. As far as whether or not people believed everything he said, that didn't matter. The important thing was that they knew that he was important to the Fang clan, the immortal ancient Taoist rite, and the sublime flow sword grotto. That would be enough. Amidst the uproar, the tentacle up in midair suddenly vanished. A cold harumph echoed out, but was accompanied by no words. The two Tao realm auras from the demonic cultivator horde vanished. In that moment, the two other almighty Tao realm auras from the other two factions stared deeply at Meng Hao, and then slowly faded away. Just as Meng Hao had guessed, the truth of his words weren't important. Everyone could now see how deeply he was backed by the powerful forces in Ninth Mountain and Sea, and also understood the main point of all of his words. Don't provoke me. Chapter 1041, The Origin. Don't provoke me. Meng Hao didn't actually speak the words, but based on everything he had said, the message to all his enemies was clear. Don't provoke me. If you do, be prepared to deal with the consequences. Today, I killed one demonic cultivator and captured 33 more. Well then, if you dare to provoke me tomorrow, then I'll do the same thing. And if you push me even further, then I'll flip the table over and really cause a scene. The streams of Tao Realm divine sense faded away. Meng Hao's first day in the Nine Seas God world was a day in which his name spread throughout the entire sect. All disciples heard about what happened, leaving them with a profound impression. Fan Donger looked deeply at Meng Hao for a moment, but didn't say anything. Her expression from earlier, in which she was rejoicing in his misfortune, was completely gone. Now, her fear of him was even more deeply rooted. The demonic cultivator's hatred was still there, but Meng Hao had established his position in the sect. He still wasn't sure why they hated him so much, but it didn't matter. He had already secured his position. There wasn't a single demonic cultivator in the entire sect who would dare to make a move against him. No one in the immortal realm was his match. He had castigated the ancient realm, and even the Tao realm was intimidated by him. The glorious scene in which he revealed his terrifying background caused the demonic cultivators to not only fear him, but to also be jealous of him, and to curse his arrogant and despotic display. Ling Yunzi left with Meng Hao in tow. The rest of the cultivators gradually dispersed. When Meng Hao's vision cleared, he was in a mountain range deep in the Nine Seas God world. His current location was a mountain, the top half of which was covered with snow. The frigid cold was evidence of the strength of the energy of heaven and earth here. Despite the Nine Seas God world being at the bottom of the sea, the entire landmass was surrounded by a huge invisible shield which kept the seawater out. However, the massive pressure exerted by the Ninth Sea was still there. At the top of the mountain was a temple, which was where Ling Yunzi was taking Meng Hao. As soon as he entered, he saw that there were two other people sitting there cross-legged. One of them was the old woman from earlier. She wore a long gray robe, and her face was a mass of wrinkles. Her hair was long and white, and her expression archaic, as if she had existed for many, many years. Her eyes sparkled with a wisdom that seemed to indicate that she could see through the hearts of men. Of course, Tao Realm experts were all eccentrics with vast experience and unique personalities. They could tell that Meng Hao's previous threats had been nothing more than explanations about his background. However, he had intentionally spoken them out and then let them hang in the air suspensefully. In the end, it didn't really matter if the Tao Realm experts fully believed him or not. The important thing was to plant seeds of doubt and fear in their minds. Next to the old woman was an old man with an expressionless face, wearing a green robe. As he sat there cross-legged, his gaze swept over Meng Hao, seemingly sizing him up. His eyes seemed to contain a sharpness, an ability to thoroughly probe every aspect of Meng Hao. His eyes lingered for a moment on Meng Hao's forehead, and his eyes sparkled. Under the old man's gaze, Meng Hao felt his cultivation base involuntarily rotating, and all of a sudden, his forehead flickered as the echelon mark appeared. When the old man saw the mark, he nodded and looked away. "Meng Hao," said the old woman, smiling, "you can call me Granny Nine." Her expression was kind as she spoke to Meng Hao. "As for the guru sitting next to me, you should refer to him as Godmaster." Meng Hao offers greetings to Matriarch Granny Nine and Guru Godmaster. Meng Hao immediately reigned in all of his domineering and arrogant manner from before, and put on a very meek and charming demeanor. He even looked a bit bashful as he clasped hands and offered formal greetings. When they saw Meng Hao's bashful expression, Granny Nine apparently found it very amusing. She looked at Meng Hao, her gaze kind and gentle. Next to her, Ling Yunzi's expression was one of approval. Years ago, during the three great Taoist societies, trial by fire, he had long since come to have a good impression of Meng Hao, especially his willingness to sacrifice so much for the Nine Seas God world. It had definitely left him with a deep impression. "This is for you," Granny Nine said with a laugh. "Consider it your welcoming gift for joining the sect." She made a grasping motion, causing a bag of holding to appear, which she sent floating over to Meng Hao. He blinked, then accepted it and scanned it with divine sense. Immediately, his heart began to pound with excitement. The bag of holding was filled with masses of pill formulas and jade slips. There was also a huge collection of medicinal plants, many of which were extremely rare in the outside world. The value of the contents of this bag was astronomical. Ling Yunzi chuckled and said, "We know you're fond of alchemy, so the three of us old-timers prepared this special gift to give you upon our first meeting. Many of the items in that bag were things that we recently took a trip to acquire just for you." Although his words seemed straightforward, the medicinal plants were clearly a reminder to Meng Hao of how much the three of them valued him. Meng Hao immediately bowed again and said, "Patriarchs, I offer profound thanks for this expression of utmost generosity and kindness." With no hesitation whatsoever, he quickly put the bag of holding into his robe, and as he did, he saw the three old-timers shaking their heads and smiling. Even Godmaster, whose face had been expressionless, was now smiling. "First of all," said Granny Nine, "allow us to apologize for what happened when you first arrived in the Ninth Sea. That was a bit beyond what we had anticipated. Originally, we would have come out immediately to resolve the situation, but because of some certain unforeseen circumstances, we were unable to. We hope that you can understand." Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever. He was not a newcomer to the world of cultivation, and had in fact practiced cultivation for many years. He had experienced many situations of mutual deception, and knew that there were just some matters that couldn't be pursued too seriously. He might be able to believe that she was unaware of the reaction his arrival would provoke among the demonic cultivator horde, but he was also sure that the resulting conflict had caused Granny Nine and the faction she represented to suddenly have other motives. After all, they were the primary faction in the Nine Seas God world, and clearly, they wanted to use the opportunity to put the demonic cultivator horde in place. Meng Hao couldn't really say anything about that. It was much the same as it had been in the Fang clan. He had been used in a similar way back then, which was fine. However, being used in such a way should come with compensation. Therefore, after receiving the bag of holding, he quickly put any feelings of ill will to rest. Meng Hao was sure that if events hadn't played out the way they had, there would still have been a gift presented. However, it would most likely have contained about half of the valuable medicinal plants that it did. Seeing Meng Hao's obedient and charming attitude, as well as his quick wit and lack of any prying into the details of what had happened, caused the praise in Granny Nine's eyes to grow even stronger. "Now that you're here in the Nine Seas God world, I'll give you a simple rundown of the origin of the three great Taoist societies," the woman began slowly. As soon as she started talking, Meng Hao's ears perked up. "These are things that we can tell you, but they must not be spread beyond this room. The three great Taoist societies have existed eternally from the beginning of the Nine Mountain and Seas down to this day. As to how they were started, well, they were founded by none other than the three supreme paragons. The true names of those three paragons have long since been forgotten. However, everyone referred to them as Paragon Immortal Ancient, Paragon Nine Seals, and Paragon Sea Dream. Paragon Immortal Ancient founded the immortal ancient Taoist rite. Paragon Sea Dream founded the Nine Seas God world and the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto. That is the origin of the three great Taoist societies. You have met Paragon Sea Dream. She is the one who placed you into the echelon. She is also the only surviving paragon." Granny Nine's voice floated out as if from ancient times, slowly lifting up the veil that covered the truth of the history of the three great Taoist societies. Meng Hao was silent for a moment. Some of these things were matters he had already guessed the truth of. However, to hear them personally out of the mouth of the Granny Nine left him quite shaken. Finally, he asked, "The three great Taoist societies aren't specific to the Ninth Mountain and Sea, are they? And what about Paragon Nine Seals? What did he create?" "Excellent questions," replied the woman, nodding. Her eyes shone with praise. "Each and every one of the Nine Mountains and Seas has three great Taoist societies." Her words caused Meng Hao's mind to spin. "They are all called the Nine Seas God World, the Immortal Ancient Taoist Rite, and the Sublime Flow Sword Grotto. There are Nine Seas God Worlds, and when they are combined, that is the true Nine Seas God World." Granny Nine's voice was calm as she spoke. As for Paragon Nine Seals, nobody knows exactly what he founded. However, throughout the years, various clues have been discovered, which have led to sundry speculations and rumors. At this point, Granny Nine stopped talking, almost as if she were still in shock and disbelief over the words she was about to speak. The person to complete the thought was not the Granny Nine, but the expressionless old man who was called Guru Godmaster. According to the rumors, he said, Paragon 9 seals created the entire mountain and sea realm. When Meng Hao heard this, his mind filled with crashing rumbling. The information contained in what he had heard was something completely unheard of, leaving him shaken and panting. Paragon 9 seals created the mountain and sea realm, he exclaimed. It's merely speculation, Godmaster said, his archaic voice echoing out through the temple hall. There's no way to determine whether it's true or not. However, Paragon 9 Seals was the leader of the three great paragons, so perhaps, during the era of the Great War, he was the only one who could accomplish such a feat, to reverse the fate of the cosmos, and to leave behind a tiny strand of incense burning as a memorial for the immortal realm. His voice reverberated throughout the temple. It is this speculation that leads us to believe that Paragon 9 Seals, Taoist magic, was none other than the mountain and sea scripture. Whoever can acquire the full mountain and sea scripture will be the lord of the mountain and sea realm. That person will lead us into battle against the 33 heavens and restore the immortal realm to its former glory. The world we live in is the immortal realm, the Paragon immortal realm which once ruled over all the 3,000 lower realms. Godmaster closed his eyes to conceal the grief contained therein. Meng Hao was breathing heavily. He had learned from his soul search of Yifazi that the mountain and sea realm was what remained of the Paragon immortal realm. However, to hear the story directly from the mouth of Guru Godmaster was a different matter. All of a sudden, images he had gained from the soul search floated up in his mind. It's enough that you know just this much, Granny Nine said softly. It's better that you remain unaware of some of the more complicated details. The mission of the three great Taoist societies is to help the echelon grow. The echelon was begun by Paragon Sea Dream. All of the 9 mountains and seas have cultivators who are part of the echelon. As for the 9th mountain and sea, we have the fewest members. The first was your ancestor, and the second is you. Your path is not limited to the 9th mountain and sea, but rather the entire mountain and sea realm. Your competitors are no longer the fellow members of your generation, but rather members of the echelon from throughout the mountain and sea realm. The echelon battles are brutal and on many occasions are not just between 2 opponents. Sometimes, the power of entire sects will back 2 opponents, even leading to huge intermountain wars. We are not asking you to be the most powerful member of the echelon. Rather, we just hope that you can maintain your spot. If you simply continue on down your path, then whatever price must be paid by the 3 great Taoist societies of the 9th mountain and sea will be worth it. Granny Nine looked deep into Meng Hao's eyes, her expression one of anticipation. Meng Hao found it hard to remain calm. Although he had already guessed the truth about many of these things, his heart was still filled with incomparable waves of shock. Chapter 1042, Trial by Fire of the Windswept Realm. There wasn't even a slight breeze within the temple hall, but as of this moment, Meng Hao felt like there was a gale-force wind buffeting his heart, giving rise to waves of shock. Rumbling sounds filled his mind, causing him to feel somewhat dazed. No one can say for certain what Paragon Sea Dream's plan is for the echelon, Granny Nine said. Her voice floated like the wind throughout the temple hall. However, there is no harm in speculating. Over the years, the 3 great Taoist societies of the mountain and sea realm have pieced together what we feel is the answer. It is a simple explanation that we think comes close to the truth. The echelon is a list of paragons. The only people who can join the echelon are people who qualify to eventually become a paragon. The echelon was put in place to develop paragons for the mountain and sea realm. Granny Nine's eyes shone with flickering light, and her voice was filled with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron. After the great catastrophe, no new paragons appeared within the mountain and sea realm. Even K. Siddhigarbha, who everyone acknowledges as the most powerful cultivator in the realm, is not considered a paragon. That might seem normal, Granny Nine said softly. After all, to become a paragon is a very, very difficult thing. However, the truth of the matter is, it defies logic. As for the reasons why such a situation has come to be, perhaps only Paragon Sea Dream knows. Meng Hao's mind trembled. That is the origin of the 3 great Taoist societies in the echelon. As she finished talking, she looked at Meng Hao. Godmaster sat next to her, eyes closed, unspeaking. Ling Yunzi also sat there quietly, sighing inwardly. Granny Nine then gave Meng Hao a deep look and continued. As the 9 seas god world of the 9th mountain and sea, what we can do for you is exert all our power to assist you in entering the ancient realm. Therefore, we give you authority within all areas of the sect. We will open wide the doors to all of our Taoist magics and all of our resources, and to our utmost ability make them available to you. However, those things are secondary. The most important thing is that we will open the windswept realm for you. As soon as Granny Nine mentioned the windswept realm, Ling Yunzi slowly looked up, and Godmaster opened his eyes. An intense pressure weighed down on the temple as she spoke the name. Apparently, the words themselves contained some shocking power. Granny Nine lowered her voice and said, "The windswept realm is a trial by fire location, unique to the 9 seas god worlds of the mountain and sea realm. All of the 3 great Taoist societies has their own unique worlds within the mountain and sea realm. Each and every one of the various 9 seas god worlds, including ours, are qualified to make an appeal to open the windswept realm. Over all the years, we have only proposed to do so once, for your Fang clan's first-generation patriarch. Now, after so many years have passed, we are prepared to open it a second time, for you." "Windswept realm," Meng Hao said, somewhat taken aback. He could tell that these 3 Tao realm experts took the matter very seriously. However, he had never heard of this windswept realm before. It was completely foreign to him. "Before the great catastrophe," Granny Nine explained wistfully, "there were 3,000 lower realms beneath the Paragon Immortal Realm. During the catastrophe, many of those 3,000 lower realms rebelled. War broke out, and in the end, almost all of them were destroyed. Only 33 realms remained complete. The windswept realm was once one of the 3,000 lower realms. It was one of the rebel realms that was mostly destroyed in the Great War. The bit that remained was taken away by Paragon Sea Dream. All who live there now are the descendants of those felon citizens. Over the years, after having been continuously groomed and trained for many years, they returned to upholding many of their former traditions. They came to hold the immortal realm in reverence and awe, and became the location of the 9 seas god world's trial by fire. There you can experience how utterly supreme the immortal realm was in its heyday." At this point, a strange gleam appeared in Godmaster's eyes. Even Ling Yunzi was panting as he contemplated his desire for the glories of the past. The reason why the windswept realm became a location for a trial by fire, and in fact, the first such location for the 9 seas god world, is because, when the windswept realm was shattered, its essence was thrown into chaos. Because of that chaotic state, the area is much easier to analyze. Therefore, to cultivators, it is the perfect location to experience the sensation of essence. Granny Nine's voice seemed to contain a bizarre power as it bored into Meng Hao's ears, causing his heart to tremble ceaselessly. "Essence is the door to the Tao realm," she continued slowly. "Furthermore, traversing the ancient realm is the process of continually making contact with essence. That is especially true in the windswept realm. The world essence can be absorbed, leading to incredible enlightenment regarding the essence power. As for you personally, you will be able to directly form your Tao fruit, and use the essence of that world to directly enter the ancient realm." When Meng Hao heard all of this, his mind reeled. He had learned about some of the matters of the past from Yufazi's memories, but now that he heard Granny Nine's explanation, he understood about the windswept realm. It was one of the worlds of the past. Although only half of it remained, it was still a different world. Meng Hao took a deep breath, and his eyes shone with a strange light. His path to the ancient realm had to do with nirvana fruits. Now that he knew he could use the essence of that world to form Tao fruits, he was also certain that it would be of extreme usefulness in absorbing his nirvana fruits. "The windswept realm will be opened for your trial by fire by us here in the 9th mountain and sea. However, the windswept realm belongs to all of the 9 seas god worlds of the mountain and sea realm. Therefore, when you go in, other 9 seas god worlds will also dispatch disciples to enter. Obviously, since they are qualified to open the windswept realm, they will also have arranged for qualified disciples to enter who are also in the echelon. As such, when you enter the windswept realm for your trial by fire, you will likely encounter other members of the echelon from the mountain and sea realm." As she said these things, her eyes glowed with a brilliant light. "If you can, kill the other members of the echelon from the mountain and sea realm. However, if you aren't able to kill them, don't forget that protecting your own life is your main priority." Meng Hao looked at Granny Nine silently for a moment and then nodded. He understood that the echelon was like a brood of magical venomous insects which grew strong by preying on each other. Once you were in the echelon, only by passing through numerous deadly situations alive could one become truly powerful? Currently, the mountain and sea realm needed some extreme power. It needed a true paragon. Perhaps what it needs is not just a paragon, he thought. After all, the three great paragons of yesteryear were only able to preserve a small memorial to the immortal realm and thus prevent its complete destruction. Perhaps, in order to resolve all of the problems that exist, what is needed is something that exceeds a paragon. Meng Hao took a deep breath, and suddenly an image appeared in his mind. He saw 9 suns dragging an enormous statue. There were also 9 butterflies pulling a gigantic coffin. 1. I have compiled a list of chapters mentioning 9 suns and 9 butterflies. Have at it. 555, 587, 613, 652, 664, 818, 819, 954, 1026. Although we have already begun preparations to open the windswept realm, Granny 9 said calmly, we still need 3 months to be completely ready. During those 3 months, stay in the sect and prepare fully for the battles you will face. The pressure exerted by the Ninth Sea will put a heavy burden on you in terms of cultivation. You need to acclimate yourself to it as quickly as possible. Not only will it help you in the years to come, more importantly, the fact that the windswept realm is half destroyed and its essence is in chaos means that you will find similar pressure there. Only by getting used to the pressure of the Ninth Sea will you be able to function normally in the windswept realm. If you don't, every step you take there will be an arduous one. In addition, don't forget about our sect's Golden Gate stone steels. Each one of them represents a trial by fire. I hope that you can participate in every one of them. You must do everything possible to make yourself stronger during these coming 3 months. I hope to see your name on each one of those steels. You are in the echelon, the second of your kind throughout all the history of the Ninth Mountain and Sea. Granny 9 waved her hand, sending a bag of holding flying out to hover in front of Meng Hao. Inside that bag of holding, you will find the first place prize for our Taoist Society's disciple recruitment event. There were many rewards, all of which are inside. Of course, the most valuable of all would be, secondarily, the ancient immortal artifact, and most of all, Paragon blood. Before entering the windswept realm, you can use it to experience what intense power is truly like. How far your path stretches out ahead of you depends on your good fortune. Granny 9 gave Meng Hao a deep look that was clearly filled with hope and anticipation. Meng Hao took a deep breath as he looked silently at the bag of holding. Finally, his eyes began to shine with a bright light, and he reached out and took the bag. Then he clasped hands and bowed deeply to Granny 9, to Godmaster, and to Ling Yunzi. He did not make any promises or utter expressions of thanks. At the moment, anything he said would be meaningless. Only by clasping hands and bowing could he express his sincerity and determination. Granny 9's eyes glowed with praise, and Godmaster nodded. Ling Yunzi already thought well of Meng Hao, and a slight smile could be seen on his face. Go, Granny 9 said, smiling. That bag of holding also contains a jade slip key to an immortal's cave. It is there that you may practice cultivation in the coming 3 months. There is also an identity command medallion, which you can use to go anywhere in the sect. Meng Hao nodded. It was at this point that Godmaster suddenly spoke. When the demonic cultivator horde asked for you to return their disciples that you captured, all you had to do was give them back, and the problem would have been resolved. Why be so uncompromising? The old man's face was expressionless, but his eyes shone with a profound look. If the result of me returning them was a reduction in the hostility shown toward me by the demonic cultivators, then of course I would have, explained Meng Hao. However, that clearly would not have happened. Therefore, why should I return them? I can sell all of those seafood dishes for spirit stones and immortal jade, or use them as threats. He smiled. Godmaster was also smiling as he replied, you will be safe inside the sect. However, if you go out, you must be extremely cautious. If anything untoward happens, do not hesitate to crush your command medallion. As long as you are within 1 million nautical miles of the sect, I can be there within 3 breaths of time to provide aid. Then he closed his eyes and said no more. Now that he was certain about Meng Hao's personality, he firmly approved of him. Meng Hao clasped hands and bowed. He was just about to leave when all of a sudden, he stopped in place and turned back to look at the 3 old-timers. Junior wishes to ask a question. What exactly is the reason that the sea beasts attacked me when I entered the Ninth Sea? Furthermore, why did I cause such an uproar among the demonic cultivators when I arrived at the Nine Seas God world? Why do they hate me so much? It almost seemed like the level of their cultivation base didn't matter. They instantly hated me so much that they couldn't live under the same sky as me. I really don't understand. Seniors, can you clear up this matter? Meng Hao looked at the three old-timers expectantly. He truly wished to know the answer to this question. He just didn't believe that they didn't know the answer. Considering their status in the sect, even if they had known nothing at first, a brief inquiry would have made everything clear to them. Chapter 1043, The Answer. As soon as Meng Hao asked the question, both Granny Nine and Ling Yunzi smiled. As for Godmaster, he simply sat there silently with his eyes closed. "And here I thought you were going to leave without asking," the woman said with a smile. The person to respond to the question, however, was not Granny Nine, but rather Ling Yunzi. "At first," he said, "even we weren't aware of what caused the situation. After some checking, we came to find out that it was your aura which caused everything." "My aura?" asked Meng Hao, his eyes widening. He instantly discarded more than half of his previous speculations. Ling Yunzi didn't immediately provide an explanation, but instead began to describe demonic cultivators. Demonic cultivators are a unique type of life form. They are not cultivators, and yet they are also not demons. They originally evolved because of the unique environment of the Ninth Sea. They are transmogrified life forms. They seem like cultivators but are not. They also seem like demons but are not. Because of that, they call themselves demonic cultivators. Demonic cultivators like this can only be found in the seas of the mountain and sea realm. As for the sea beasts you encountered out in the Ninth Sea, they simply have not completely transmogrified and are not quite sentient. However, give them enough time, and they all have the potential to become demonic cultivators. The demonic cultivators call themselves a horde and are extremely xenophobic. Although they are physically different from the sea beasts, they consider themselves to be all part of the same horde. Even the other sea beasts which have not yet awakened to sentience are still viewed as family. If you harm one of their family members, even a single one, then they will be able to sense that from your aura. In fact, many of them have bloodline connections to other sea beasts. Because of this, it's not hard to imagine why, in reality, the rulers of the Ninth Sea are not cultivators, but them. As Meng Hao listened, his jaw slowly dropped and his eyes went wide. He had considered virtually all possibilities, and yet nothing he had thought of had anything remotely to do with this. The truth of the matter was far, far less complicated than anything he had come up with. It wasn't about the League of Demon Sealers, or the black-colored spirit immortal stones, or some long-standing enmity with the Fang clan, or some situation in which he threatened someone's power. Meng Hao smiled wryly as he realized the truth of the matter. Once they become demonic cultivators, continued Ling Yunzi, they are actually not very different from cultivators. In fact, in many aspects they are more powerful than us. In their cultivation, they can achieve immortal ascension, can enter the ancient realm, and can step into the Tao realm. Throughout the years, many demonic cultivators have left this area and gone out to other locations in the Ninth Mountain and Sea, even to other planets. There, they reproduced, giving birth to countless successive generations of their kind. Unfortunately, though, it is only in the Ninth Sea that the beasts can gain sentience and then become demonic cultivators. In other locations, such a thing is impossible. Regardless of that, however, the sea beasts in the oceans of the other planets are all descended from the Ninth Sea. As such, they are all fellow Horde members, and many of them are even related by blood. When Ling Yunzi saw Meng Hao's wry smile, a strange expression appeared on his face. He and the other two old-timers hadn't expected a reaction like this. "I understand," said Meng Hao, sighing. "All seafood under heaven is one big family," he said, musing about how unfair the whole situation was for him. He was now certain that all of the countless sea beasts he had killed back in the Milky Way Sea on planet South Heaven were definitely fellow Horde members of the demonic cultivators here. But how could he possibly have known back then that this would be the result? Although the sea beasts were separated by a huge distance, and even multiple generations, and were obviously much weaker than the demonic cultivators here, it was impossible for them to change their blood. If he had, like the average cultivator, only killed a few in the occasional random encounter, it most likely wouldn't have caused any stir in the Ninth Sea or the Nine Seas God world. Demonic cultivators were like ordinary cultivators. They wouldn't start a blood feud because of a handful of non-sentient fellow Horde members, but Meng Hao had not just killed a few random sea creatures. He had killed almost all of the sea beasts in the Milky Way Sea. To the demonic cultivators, that was almost like a genocide of an entire branch of one of their bloodlines. Even he wasn't sure how many demon hearts he had acquired back then. It wasn't even possible to count how many sea beasts had died because of him. However many, it was enough to completely and utterly contaminate him with an indescribable aura. It was easy to imagine the reaction of the demonic cultivators to anyone who showed up in the ninth sea with an aura like that. Meng Hao was now feeling somewhat depressed. Were it some other reason, he could probably figure out a way to change things. After all, this was the ninth sea, and he had no desire to have blood enmity with the demonic cultivators. This was a matter of aura, and the ability of the fellow Horde members to sense each other. In their view, Meng Hao's hands were soaked in blood, and it was something he couldn't do anything about. "Can the aura be covered over?" he asked. "Unfortunately, this type of aura cannot be concealed," replied Ling Yunzi, sighing. "The only thing you can do is be extra careful. Try not to leave the sect. Unfortunately, it is something we could never have predicted. How could we ever have imagined that you would be infected with an aura as strong as this?" Ling Yunzi was also feeling a bit down. "The true masters of the ninth sea are the demonic cultivators," Granny Nine said slowly. "Although the nine seas god world holds sway here, if you trace things back to the beginning, we essentially forced our way in. However, legend has it that the whole reason the demonic cultivators could achieve sentience to begin with has to do with Paragon Sea Dream. Because of that, we have coexisted throughout the years and have come to accept each other. Furthermore, the demonic cultivator horde is a faction of the nine seas god world, both here in the ninth mountain and sea, and in the other nine seas god worlds in the other mountains and seas. Don't let yourself worry about it too much. The demonic cultivator horde is a part of the nine seas god world, and as such must adhere to the rules of the sect. Everything is done for the echelon. Therefore, you can simply view this matter as another trial by fire." Meng Hao sighed. All he could do now was nod his head, clasp hands, and bow. Then he turned and left the temple hall. As he walked out and stood there atop the mountain, a cold wind sprang up. He looked off into the distance and from this elevation could see most of the nine seas god world. "Well, might as well not worry about it. I can't resolve the problem, so it's not worth stewing over." He pulled out the Jade slip key from his bag of holding and scanned it with divine sense. Immediately a map of the ninth sea god world appeared. After perusing the map, he found the Immortals' cave the three old-timers had arranged for him. It was near the central district, between two mountain ranges. He put the Jade slip away, took a step forward, and then transformed into a brilliant beam of light that shot rumbling through the air toward his Immortals' cave. As he sped through the air, he encountered various disciples of the nine seas god world. If they were cultivators, they would raise an eyebrow, clearly having recognized who he was. If they were demonic cultivators, then as soon as they saw him, they visibly restrained themselves, their eyes shining with intense hatred and killing intent. Meng Hao simply kept his gaze fixed straight ahead as he sped along. He went faster and faster, and after about an hour, arrived in the region of his Immortals' cave. When he looked around, the first things that stood out were two mountain ranges that looked like dragons, stretching out far and wide. In the middle of the mountains was a huge cliff that seemed to have been formed by a seismic upheaval. Water flowed over the edge of the cliff, transforming into a towering waterfall. Rumbling rose up from the base of the waterfall, along with massive quantities of water vapor that spread out in all directions, causing a curtain of mist to obscure the area. The water at the bottom formed a crystalline, blue pool. The energy of heaven and earth was very strong in the area. Next to the pool of water was a two-story residence. The entire area was filled with the fragrance of flowers and the singing of birds. It was like a celestial garden, filled with exotic plants and flowers, whose fragrance filled the canyon-like area surrounding the pool of water. Cliffs rose up on all sides like impassable obstacles. Even though his place was almost in the center of the nine seas god world, it was secluded and peaceful. Furthermore, considering that the residence was built into the cliff face, it was easy to imagine that it was far larger than its outward appearance. In fact, deep inside the cliff, there would definitely be chambers carved into the stone. As soon as Meng Hao laid eyes on it, he was thoroughly pleased. His body flashed as he flew down past the waterfall and landed next to the pool of water. Numerous animals in the area were startled and scattered in all directions. The grass and plants swayed gently at the disturbance, causing a fragrant aroma to fill the air. The sound of the falling waterfall instantly lifted Meng Hao's spirits. "This place is great," he thought, looking around contentedly. He walked over to the residence and looked around with increasing satisfaction, then let out a light, E. He raised his right hand and performed an incantation gesture, then pointed out. His gesture caused a wind to spring up toward a stone stele located in front of the residence. When the wind touched the stele, it shuddered. Next, a glowing shield sprang up to cover the entire area. The sky up above was sealed off, and the waterfall was interrupted. No more water fell down, and water began to build up on the shield. Soon, it looked like a second pool of water floating in the air up above. The sides of this new pool were formed by the cliff faces, and its bottom was the shield. When he saw it, Meng Hao's eyes shone brightly as he realized that this was the ultimate location for secluded meditation. It was completely cut off from the world, and also totally safe. In the same moment that Meng Hao was looking around contentedly at his immortal's cave in the Nine Seas God world, far, far away, something happened in the starry sky. That place was not located in the mountain and sea realm. Furthermore, it was a location outside of the 33 heavens. It was located in a different starry sky. Visible was a projection of an ancient land mass. It was so enormous that it was impossible to describe, and it hung there in the void, emanating constant and endless pressure. Within this projected world was a huge coffin, as well as 9 beautiful, colorful butterflies. Surrounding the coffin was an endless sea of people, all prostrating themselves in worship. In front of the crowds of people were 3 young women who were indescribably beautiful. Their eyes were filled with both hope and reminiscence as they looked at the coffin, and then down at the land beneath their feet. In front of the 3 young women was an old man wearing a black robe. At his back was the illusory image of an ancient tree. Currently, his 2 hands were held aloft, and he was shouting loudly up into the air. It sounded like some sort of curse, although it was impossible to hear exactly what he was saying. It didn't take long, however, for a massive black mist to appear in front of him. It roiled and seethed, emanating a strong aura of death. I found it, almost. If it is used just one more time, I'll be able to locate it. After a long moment, the old man coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his body seemed to wither. The tree behind him also withered, as if he had just spent a huge amount of life force to speak those words. It wasn't just him who paid the price to speak the words. Everyone in the sea of people around him also spit up mouthfuls of blood. The 9 butterflies trembled, and of the 4 wings they each possessed, 2 fell off. In another location within the same void in which that world projection existed, was yet another boundlessly majestic projection of a world. Within that world existed a huge statue of a man. In that world there were 9 suns. At the foot of the statue was a young man wearing a white robe. If you looked closely, you would see that he looked exactly like the statue. He shook his head and smiled. Mother was right. Those who are reborn are always more eager than those who have already returned. 1. I saw speculation by Chinese fans about what this last line means, but nothing very definite. I'll continue to do some research, and if I find anything more, I'll post on Twitter or in a chapter release. Note from Urgen, lots of you readers guessed the answer. Pretty awesome. Note from Deathblade, same with readers of the translation. I saw quite a few correct guesses. Unless you were secretly posting spoilers as guesses, in which case you have sown vile karma and will be punished. /expand. The people of the mountain and sea realm had no way of knowing what was happening outside of their realm. Back in the 9 Seas God world, in the valley between the 2 mountain ranges, the pool of water continued to build up above the shield. At the same time, a figure stepped out noiselessly from within the residence. Meng Hao had sensed this person earlier, and as such, his expression did not change when the young boy walked out. He looked to be about 7 or 8 years old, wore a red robe, and had a completely expressionless face. As soon as he stepped out, he clasped hands and bowed to Meng Hao. "What an incredible puppet," Meng Hao murmured, walking up to the boy and looking him over. The boy looked almost as if he had been carved out of a lustrous piece of rare jade. Meng Hao reached his hand out and pressed it down onto the puppet. Immediately, an additional puppet-controlling mnemonic appeared in his mind. This immortal's cave must be one of the best within the 9 Seas God world, the thought. Only a place like this could be deserving such a puppet. Whenever I have to deal with acquiring cultivation resources, I can just send him out to handle things. Furthermore, it looks like he has battle prowess equivalent to stage 7 immortal. Meng Hao was very pleased. This immortal's cave far exceeded any other immortal's cave he had ever lived in. Regardless of whether or not the pool of water was being fed by the waterfall, it was as blue and crystalline as ever. Furthermore, the pond itself was actually made, not from fresh water but seawater. "How considerate of them," he said. Then he waved his hand, instantly causing the 33 demonic cultivators to fly out of his bag of holding and splash into the pool. Before they could even react, he performed an incantation gesture and then waved his finger. Popping sounds rang out as all of the 33 demonic cultivators were sealed. All of them reverted to their original forms, whereupon they spun and began to howl at Meng Hao in rage. "Shut up," he growled. His voice echoed out like thunder, instantly causing all of the demonic cultivators to tremble. Moments later, everything was quiet. The demonic cultivators now looked like sea beasts, but they were still glaring angrily at Meng Hao. That was especially true of the gigantic shell, which had now cracked open to reveal a pair of venomous eyes staring out at him. There was also a huge sea turtle, who looked especially fierce. In addition to those two, there was a big shrimp, a crab, a seahorse, and others. Meng Hao looked them over, and then a grotesque idea suddenly popped up in his head. "This pool of water almost looks like a giant pot. If I heated the water up," he swallowed, then quickly shoved the wicked idea away. However, it was in that moment that the demonic cultivators, who had just quieted down moments ago, suddenly lost control and began to roar again. A few of them even tried to charge at Meng Hao in attack. With a cold harumph, Meng Hao pointed his hand downward, causing all of them to tremble as if great pressure were weighing down on them. It was impossible for them to escape from within the pool of water, so once again, the sound of vehement curses rose up into the air. Ignoring them, Meng Hao waved his right finger, causing a strand of the essence of divine flame to fly out from his immortal meridians. It landed in the water, and in the blink of an eye, the water began to bubble. Meng Hao cleared his throat and then somewhat embarrassedly said, "If you don't keep your voices down, there are no guarantees that I won't boil you up and have a taste." His words, combined with the fact that the water in the pool was rapidly getting hotter, caused the demonic cultivators to tremble. They looked at Meng Hao, not with hatred but rather terror and shock. They had never imagined that Meng Hao would actually boil them into a stew. Seeing that the demonic cultivators had quieted down, Meng Hao waved a hand, retracting the strand of the essence of divine flame. The water temperature in the pool instantly began to return to normal. "That's better now," he said earnestly. "Remember to be good and do as you're told. You people owe me money and can't pay it back. That was why you handed yourselves over to me. Now I'm going to provide you with a master to help you learn how to achieve your goal, which is to sell yourselves." With that, he slapped his bag of holding, causing the parrot to shoot out in a beam of black light. The tinkling sound of a bell could be heard, along with a torrent of squawks. "Lord Fifth is out. Lord Fifth swears to never go back into that bag of holding. Lord Fifth is free. Lord Fifth is going to Even in midst of its tirade, Lord Fifth suddenly looked down at all the demonic cultivators in the pool of water. The Belform meat jelly was also in the midst of howling in rage, when suddenly it realized the parrot had grown silent. It, too, looked down at the demonic cultivators. After staring for a moment, the meat jelly got excited and said, "Are we taking a bath together?" as if it wanted to join in. The parrot flew around in a circle, looking closely at the situation, and then roared, "Moron! Idiot! Can't you see he's making some seafood stew? They're not taking a bath, damn it! How come none of this seafood has fur?" Meng Hao cleared his throat and then addressed the meat jelly. "These are all bullies. You can count if you want. There are three bullies. I caught them just for you and brought them here for you to practice your divine ability of converting people." The meat jelly quivered with excitement as it counted. When it was done, it looked over at Meng Hao as if he were the best person in the whole world. In the meat jelly's opinion, it had never met a master who treated it as well as Meng Hao did. Meng Hao smiled slightly, as if the two of them were best friends. Then he glanced over at the parrot and glared threateningly. "We can sell every one of these seafood dishes that you can get to behave for a handsome profit. For each one, I'll find one extremely furry creature for you. If you can train them all, then later, I'll give you a 30% split." When the parrot heard the words extremely furry, it instantly got very excited. It suddenly began to visualize all sorts of extremely furry creatures, and that only increased its enthusiasm. It immediately agreed to Meng Hao's proposal. Meng Hao promptly ignored the parrot and meat jelly as they began to torment the demonic cultivators. He was sure that, considering how strong they were, getting the demonic cultivator seafood dishes in line wasn't an impossibility for them. "Then there's that wench Suyan," he thought. "I'll wait a few more days and then hand her over to the parrot and meat jelly for re-education. I just can't believe that she'll continue to hold out after that." Having made up his mind, he entered the residence. The residence itself wasn't very large. However, there was a stone door on the second floor. Behind the stone door were 3 chambers, each of which were relatively large. After examining them, Meng Hao muttered to himself for a moment. Then, eyes glittering, he slapped his bag of holding, causing 30 black beetles to fly out, 10 for each chamber. Glancing thoughtfully at the ghost eyes on their backs, he thought, I heard Su Yan call these things ghost eye beetles. They like eating spirit immortal stones. Well then, I might as well let them eat their fill, and see what kind of ghost eye appears in the end. He had come up with this idea some time ago, so, clenching his teeth, he didn't hesitate any further. He hated losing spirit immortal stones, but he also knew that on the path of cultivation, you had to lose some to win some. He waved his hand, causing 30 spirit immortal stones to fly out into the 3 chambers. Instantly, the ghost eye beetles went mad, clawing their way forward to grab the stones. He threw out 1 stone per beetle in order to prevent them from fighting too much. After all, he only had 500 ghost eye beetles, and wanted to avoid a situation in which they killed each other. It didn't take long for the ghost eye beetles to consume the spirit immortal stones, after which they sat there, motionless. However, their auras grew wildly stronger and their bodies grew tougher, as if they were in the process of absorbing energy from the stones they had swallowed. After a moment of consideration, he decided that since the ghost eye beetles were taking some time to absorb the energy, he would make use of the puppet boy. Summoning him over, he handed some spirit immortal stones over and then left some divine will instructions that the puppet continue to feed the stones to the beetles as necessary. Then he left the stone chambers and sat down cross-legged on the second floor of the residence. He took a deep breath, and determination gleamed in his eyes as he extended his right hand. Immediately a bag of holding appeared, which he scanned with divine sense. He saw quite a collection of spirit stones and immortal jade, as well as an incense burner. The incense burner had an ancient feel to it, as though its aura was filled with years of time. This thing must be the immortal artifact that Patriarch Granny 9 mentioned, he thought. Ignoring it for the moment, he excitedly searched through the bag of holding to find the most precious item it contained. A jade vial. The vial was only the size of a pinky finger and it contained a drop of red fluid. It was none other than Paragon's blood. He carefully retrieved the vial from the bag of holding, then placed it onto his palm. Panting, he thought back to the 3 great Taoist societies, trial by fire, and how he had taken first place. For some reason, it seemed like a very, very long time ago. I finally got my prize, but I wonder, which paragon did this blood come from? Was it the white-robed sea dream, or was it immortal ancient, or could it be from Paragon 9 seals? He took a deep breath and without any further hesitation opened the jade vial. Instead of pouring the paragon's blood out, he slowly sent his divine sense into the vial. Almost as soon as his divine sense made contact with the paragon's blood, a bloody mist rose up. In the blink of an eye, it swept back through his divine sense toward him. He was shocked, but after a moment of hesitation, he gritted his teeth and sat in place without moving. That strand of blood mist bored into his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. In the same moment, he closed the jade vial, ensuring that the paragon's blood remained inside. Apparently, that drop was only a 30% sample. However, even that 30% created a massive power that surged madly through his body. Blue veins popped out on his face, and his whole body shook. The blood mist transformed into millions of strands which bored into his immortal meridians. Gradually, the vague power of a Tao fruit began to form. Moments later, it collapsed, battering around the inside of Meng Hao's body. Shaken, he quickly produced a nirvana fruit and pushed it into his forehead. In that moment, the tens of millions of strands inside of him all seemed to have found their exit. His body shook, and his aura exploded upward. All of his immortal chi was unleashed. His energy surged as the nirvana fruit apparently began to fuse into his blood vessels and chi passageways. If he absorbed it completely, that would indicate that he had fused successfully with the nirvana fruit. That would also mean that he would rise up in his position in the immortal realm and would be incredibly close to being able to remain in the immortal emperor realm, eternally. Chapter 1044, Initial Absorption of Paragon Blood. Chapter 1045, Rocked. Time passed one breath at a time. He had long since passed the usual time limit for the nirvana fruit. However, after enough time had passed for an incense stick to burn, he still sat there, nirvana fruit fully absorbed. He opened his eyes, grabbed the jade vial and was about to open it, but then hesitated. The hundreds of thousands of strands inside of him were growing dimmer and would rapidly vanish. Unfortunately, the nirvana fruit still wasn't completely fused with him, not even by half. In terms of percentages, then as of this moment, the nirvana fruit seemed to be about 1% fused. Even if I completely absorbed this entire sample of Paragon's blood, he thought, then at most I could achieve a 4% absorption. It's not that the Paragon's blood isn't strong nor that it's fake. Rather, this drop of blood is simply too diluted. Who knows how many dilutions it's gone through? He sighed inwardly. He knew that even if the three great Taoist societies did have complete specimens of Paragon's blood, they would still be incredibly scarce. There was no way they would give him a complete drop. It was true that he was in the echelon. However, taking a broad view, it was impossible to say whether or not another echelon member might come along in the future. Although the three great Taoist societies valued him, they couldn't possibly give him undiluted Paragon's blood. Even a highly diluted drop could still be considered a precious treasure. From the very beginning, all they had agreed to give him was some Paragon's blood. They had never said that it would be complete. If I could get a complete, full drop, then I'm certain that after absorbing it, I would then be able to completely fuse with the nirvana fruit, and I would truly be an immortal emperor. Desire gleamed in Meng Hao's eyes as he thought about the possibility of being able to eternally retain a cultivation base that exceeded the immortal realm Paragon. Meng Hao took a deep breath, and his eyes shone brightly. Not complete. Well then, I'll just have to create my own complete drop of Paragon's blood. Gritting his teeth, he slowly pulled the copper mirror out of his bag of holding. He was of course concerned about how much it might cost him. In fact, he wasn't even sure if the copper mirror was powerful enough to duplicate the Paragon's blood. However, determination filled his face as he looked at the copper mirror for a moment, then placed the vial of Paragon's blood on its surface. Immediately, the vial began to sink down into the mirror. Then the mirror suddenly went berserk in a way it never had before. It shook wildly, flying out of Meng Hao's hands and up into the air. Brilliant beams of light shot out in all directions, along with a shocking aura. In the blink of an eye, the entire residence was inundated by a terrifying aura, which began to spread further out. If nothing was done about the spreading of this aura, it would go on to fill the entire Nine Seas God world and the entire Ninth Sea. From there, it would spread out to fill all of the Ninth Mountain and Sea, and eventually, the entirety of the mountain and sea realm. Outside the residence, the parrot was flying proudly through the air, looking extremely excited at the prospect of how happy its life would be after it exchanged all of the seafood for furry beasts. Having reached this point in its train of thought, it immediately turned to all of the demonic cultivators and roared, "Now listen well to Lord Fifth, all of you." However, before it could even finish speaking, a tremor suddenly ran through its body, as if some incredible power had suddenly sucked it dry. It withered rapidly, causing it to gape in shock. It suddenly turned to look toward Meng Hao and the residents, clearly astonished. Then it let out the most shrill, anxious squawk that it had ever uttered since it had begun to follow Meng Hao. It was usually quite calm and collected. It had never reacted this strongly to anything, not even when it ran into the most luxuriantly furred or feathered creatures. It seemed so nervous that it might collapse at any moment, as if the sky were about to fall or the entire world was about to explode. "He's still alive," the parrot shrieked. Then it shot toward the residents at top speed, looking completely flustered. It went so fast that numerous feathers were stripped off of it, falling to the ground. Its body shivered with unprecedented terror. Inside the residence, Meng Hao's eyes widened at the intensity of the aura, an aura that seemed to either ignore or trample upon all natural laws. It was vastly domineering, as if the heavens and the starry sky both might be crushed by its terrifying energy. Suddenly he could hear a pulsating voice murmuring from within the mirror. It was archaic, seemingly stretching out from ancient times, causing his mind to reel. All of a sudden, countless images flickered in his eyes. Of all those various images, there were only 3 that he could see clearly. The rest were flickering blurs. However, the 3 images he could see caused his scalp to go numb, and his expression to fill with a look of disbelief and utter astonishment. The first image was that of the heavens in a starless sky. It was a picture of chaos. There were no heavenly bodies, only emptiness. Then a beam of light appeared, shooting along at top speed. Within the flickering light, shockingly, was the copper mirror. As it flew along, the surface of the mirror flickered. Immediately, a heavenly body appeared off to the side. It proceeded along. One after another heavenly body appeared without pause. In the end, its flickering caused the starry sky to appear, as if it were creating whole worlds. It continued on without stop, as if there were no end to its movement. Eventually, however, it vanished, having created innumerable stretches of starry sky that formed countless worlds. Meng Hao's mind reeled with shock. The second image he saw was of the uncountable entities which inhabited the various heavenly bodies and worlds that had been created. They were not cultivators, but rather a vast multitude of indescribable living things. Some looked like beasts, others were liquid. Some were made of gas, and others were made of metal or stone. There seemed to be an infinite variety, and they were all currently engaged in a chaotic battle. All of these entities were far, far more powerful than Meng Hao. They were in the Tao realm. Meng Hao could scarcely even comprehend how there could be so many Tao realm entities. There were simply too many, and they were all fighting each other, fighting to acquire one object. That object was none other than a copper mirror. Their battling gave rise to countless indescribable ripples. All of a sudden, the copper mirror trembled and two pearls shot out from it, one black, one white. Each pearl then sped off in a different direction. Meng Hao could now see that actually, those two pearls had previously been inlaid on opposite sides of the mirror. The pearls were not the primary components, but rather, just subordinate objects belonging to the copper mirror. 1. The black and white pearls will likely make some readers recall the scene from the ancient demon immortal sect in chapter 613. Even still, they emanated an aura that left Meng Hao feeling completely suffocated, as though the two pearls contained an indescribable paramount power. And yet, despite that incredible power, they were still subordinates to the mirror. They were mere secondary objects. In the third image, Meng Hao saw another world. It was a world filled with corpses, corpses that had lain in place for innumerable years. The whole world felt like a graveyard. A beam of light flew along, within which was the copper mirror. The mirror was just passing by, and yet as soon as it appeared, something happened which caused Meng Hao's scalp to tingle. He saw the corpses, rising up one by one. Flesh grew anew, and the blink of an eye they were resurrected. Their eyes were filled with madness, and even more so, hope. It was as if they had been waiting for ages for this very moment. Suddenly, a hand shot up, a hand that was mostly white bone, upon which flesh and blood was rapidly forming. The instant it appeared, blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth, and his mind trembled. The feeling he got from that hand was a feeling he had only ever gotten from one other cultivator. And that person was the white-robed Paragon Sea Dream. Except from what Meng Hao could sense, the power of that hand exceeded that of Paragon Sea Dream. It stretched out toward the copper mirror and made a grasping motion. That grasping motion caused the starry sky to be crushed, as if the hand could shrink down the stars in the heavens until they were tiny items that rested in its palm. At that point the vision ended. Meng Hao coughed up a mouthful of blood, and the images faded away. This copper mirror, where does it come from? He thought. He felt as if his whole world had been turned upside down. He looked down at the copper mirror and the vial of Paragon's blood, which was still sinking down into the mirror. Most shocking of all to Meng Hao was that once again he could see that the surface of the copper mirror was not complete. It was shattered and only had one piece in place. How could he possibly forget how he had helped the mirror to acquire that piece in the ancient demon immortal sect? 1. He added a piece to the mirror in a scene that started in chapter 618 and ended in 619. Everything that happened takes some time to describe, but actually happened in a flash. It was at this point that the parrot suddenly appeared and then sped into the mirror itself. The copper mirror trembled, and the light shining out grew even more intense. At this point, the vial of Paragon's blood finally vanished inside. The terrifying aura ceased to spread out, and instead remained only inside of the residence. After about 10 breaths of time passed, it faded away completely, returning to the copper mirror, after which it could not be detected. After the aura faded away, the parrot emerged. It was emaciated, as if it had just undergone an indescribably desperate ordeal. It smiled wryly as it looked at Meng Hao, then flopped noisily to the ground. After a moment, it struggled to rise up and fly, but could only lay there panting. Seeing the parrot in this condition caused Meng Hao to think of the images he had just seen, and he couldn't help but ask, if I hadn't placed that Paragon's blood onto the mirror. The parrot gaped for a moment. Sounding astonished, it replied, "What's it got to do with you? I was just careless and didn't notice that someone was using some magic on this mirror. If the copper mirror wasn't used, then it wouldn't matter. But once it was used, no matter what you duplicate, it will." Huh. About halfway through speaking, the parrot suddenly seemed to come to its senses. It rolled its eyes shiftily and squawked, "That's right, damn it, it's you. It's all because of you, you owe me now. At the same time that the parrot was berating Meng Hao, something was happening outside of the mountain and sea realm, outside of the 33 heavens. Far out in the void of the starry sky, in the middle of the world projection with the huge coffin, an archaic voice filled with excitement and determination suddenly echoed out to fill the entire world. I've found it, it's there, right there. After all these years, hope has finally appeared. Clan of gods, prepare to send orders down. It is time to wage war. In order to awaken our clan's underworld god, we will once again go to war with the Paragon immortal realm. As the ancient voice echoed out, the world projection began to shake. At the same time, the three women who stood near the coffin exchanged glances, then nodded to each other silently. In that instant, the entire world projection began to grow blurry. In the blink of an eye, it vanished from within the void of the heavens. Unleash the power of the world. Employ the maximum possible speed of our God realm's true form to travel there, in order to let our true world descend. The voices of the three women echoed out into the void, filled with a decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron.